Night fell heavily on Manhattan as Sara huddled her thin body in the corner of an abandoned building on the Lower East Side. The biting December wind cut through the cracks in the walls like invisible blades, and she pulled her thin coat up to her chin, knowing it wouldn't be enough. Her lips trembled as she tried to create a barrier with cardboard boxes around her small space, that corner she had claimed as hers for the past 3 weeks. The smell of mold mixed with urine permeated the air, but Sara no longer noticed. It was just another element of her cruel reality. She closed her eyes tightly, praying that sleep would come quickly and take her away from that icy hell, even if only for a few hours. At 16, Sara seemed to carry the weight of 2 entire lives on her stooped shoulders. Her face, which should have been radiant with the energy of adolescence, showed marks of profound weariness. Dark circles framed brown eyes that had already seen too much. Her hands, cracked from the cold and dirt, gripped a faded backpack tightly, as if it were the last piece of civilization she had left. Inside that battered backpack were all her belongings: a crumpled photo, a broken toothbrush, an old notebook, and an extra shirt that smelled of mildew. Sara reached into her pockets searching for warmth, but found only $2.25, all she had in the world. She wondered if she should spend it on food tomorrow or save it for an emergency that would surely come. The city noise outside remained indifferent to her suffering. Sirens blared through the night. People screamed in the street, and the sound of the subway rumbled from the depths of the underground. Sara knew that sleeping was risky in that place, but exhaustion left her no choice. She had learned to wake at the slightest strange noise, to always keep one eye half open, to trust the instinct that kept her alive. That night, as her body finally succumbed to extreme fatigue, a solitary tear rolled down her dirty cheek. She whispered a silent prayer to her parents, who were no longer there, asking for strength to face another day in that endless nightmare. But the sleep that came brought no peace, only disturbing dreams of a life she would never have again. 2 years ago, Sara was just a normal 14-year-old girl living in a quiet suburb of Albany. That Saturday morning, the sun shone softly through the curtains of her room, and she could hear her mother humming in the kitchen as she made pancakes, the family's favorite breakfast. Her father was in the garage tinkering with the car, whistling that old tune he loved, and everything seemed perfectly ordinary, perfectly safe. Sara was excited because they were going to visit her grandmother in Boston that weekend, and she had already packed her small suitcase with her favorite books and the new iPod she had received for her birthday. Nothing at that moment indicated that in a few hours, her entire life would be shattered in a way she could never have imagined. The trip began full of joy and anticipation. Her father drove, singing loudly. Her mother laughed at his silly jokes, and Sara sat in the back seat with her headphones on, occasionally joining in the conversation. They stopped at a gas station near Hartford, and Sara perfectly remembers buying a chocolate bar and her mother saying, "Don't eat it all at once, darling," with that loving smile. Back on the road, the sky began to darken rapidly. Heavy clouds heralded a storm approaching quickly. The rain started as light drops, then turned into a violent downpour that barely allowed her to see the road. Her father slowed down, turned on the hazard lights, and Sara felt for the first time a strange chill in her stomach, a feeling that something wasn't right. Then, as if the universe had conspired against that happy family, it happened in a fraction of a second. A truck lost control on the wet road and sped across the median, heading straight for them. Sara heard her mother's high-pitched scream, saw her father's wide eyes in the rearview mirror, and then the world exploded in a chaos of twisted metal, shattered glass, and unimaginable pain. The impact was so violent that the car spun 3 times before overturning on the side of the road. When everything finally stopped, an eerie silence fell. Only the sound of rain hitting metal and the whistling of the smoking engine. Sara, trapped in the back seat, was conscious but in shock, her whole body aching in ways she couldn't process. She called out to her parents in a hoarse voice, but there was no answer. What she saw next would haunt her nightmares for the next 2 years and beyond. Her parents motionless in the front seats, and the terrible knowledge that her life would never be the same again. After the accident, Sara was thrown into the New York foster care system as just another faceless statistic. With no close relatives willing to take her in and an inheritance frozen in endless bureaucratic disputes, she went through 3 foster homes in less than a year. In each one, she encountered neglect, abuse, or simply cruel indifference from the adults who should have protected her. In the last home, After being unjustly accused of theft by one of the other children, Sara made the hardest decision of her life. She ran away on a cold March night and vowed never to trust the system again. On the streets, she would be free, she thought, even if that freedom cost her dignity and safety. At least there she would only have to survive, not pretend that everything was all right while the world crumbled around her. Now, with only a few dollars in her pocket each day, Sara developed a survival routine that demanded desperate creativity. She would wake up early before 6 in the morning to use the public restrooms and subway stations while they were still relatively clean and safe. With 80 cents, she would buy a stale loaf of bread from the bakery that threw away the previous day's produce. The owner was rude but didn't kick her out. The rest of the day was a constant hunt for food. She scavenged garbage dumps looking for expensive restaurants in Midtown where tourists wasted food that was still good. Sometimes she managed to get a few coins holding the doors of coffee shops for hurried customers, always with a rehearsed smile that hid the humiliation burning inside. $5 a day wasn't just a small amount. It was a sentence of perpetual hunger, where every penny meant the difference between eating or spending the night with her stomach gnawing from the inside. The cruel mathematics of extreme poverty taught brutal lessons that no school book could impart. Sara learned that $1.50 bought a bottle of water and a small packet of biscuits, enough calories to keep her body functioning, but not enough to stave off hunger. She discovered that churches in Hell's Kitchen served soup on Sundays, and that the public library had free drinking water and restrooms where she could wash her face. Every decision was a survival calculation. Save the money for a rainy day or spend it on new socks because hers were soaked and causing painful blisters. On good days, when she managed to scrape together an extra $3 or $4, she allowed herself the luxury of a sandwich from a street vendor. Those rare moments when she could eat something hot were almost enough to make her forget, for a moment, the black hole her life had become. But reality always returned, harsh and cold, reminding her that tomorrow would be another day of impossible struggle with non-existent resources. The darkness brought with it terrors Sara never imagined existed when she still had a house, a bed, a locked door. Every night on the streets was a game of Russian roulette with dangers, human predators prowling in search of the most vulnerable, gangs controlling territories with casual violence, and the police themselves, who were sometimes more of a threat than a protection. Sara learned to become invisible after 9 o'clock at night, to cower in dark corners where the streetlights didn't reach, to breathe silently even when fear made her heart race. She slept with a piece of rusty pipe hidden under her coat, her only defense in a world that had repeatedly proven it didn't care whether she lived or died. The sound of approaching footsteps in the darkness made every muscle in her body tense, ready to run or fight, knowing that this could be the night her luck finally ran out. Hunger was a constant companion, transforming every thought, every movement, into a battle against her own biology. Sara knew intimately the different phases of hunger, the initial sharp pain that twisted her stomach, then the dizziness that made the world spin when she stood up too quickly, and finally that dangerous numbness, where her body began to shut down functions to conserve energy. She had fainted 3 times in the last month, always waking up in public places with people looking at her with pity or disgust, never with the real help she needed. Her thin body was beginning to show signs of severe malnutrition, hair falling out in clumps, brittle nails, a constant weakness that made climbing stairs seem like scaling a mountain. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the humiliation of seeing people eating in the streets, throwing food away while she starved to death just a few meters away, invisible in her misery. The specific desperation of being a homeless teenager carried extra layers of horror that adults didn't face. Sara saw girls her age going to school with new backpacks, laughing with friends, worrying about boys and tests, normal lives that seemed to exist in a completely different universe from hers. She should have been a sophomore in high school, thinking about dances and which college she wanted to go to, not calculating whether she had enough energy to walk to the temporary shelter before it closed. Her body was changing, developing, but there was no privacy to deal with it, no safe place where she could simply be a 16-year-old girl. The stares she received from some men on the streets made her skin crawl. She knew what they saw. She knew other girls who had taken terrible paths out of sheer desperation. Sara fought every day to hold on to some shred of dignity, some spark of hope that this wouldn't be forever. But with each night she spent sleeping on a cold floor, that hope became a little harder to find. It was an ordinary Tuesday in January when Sara sat on the icy steps of the Bryant Park Library, watching people hurry past, going about their important lives. She held a cup of lukewarm coffee she'd fished from a trash can. It still had half left and was warm enough to warm her frozen hands. A middle-aged man, wearing a smart overcoat and carrying a leather briefcase, rushed up the steps and tripped on the last one, nearly falling. Sara instinctively reached out to catch him, and he clung to her for a brief second before regaining his balance. "Thank you," he said breathlessly, looking straight into her eyes with a strange intensity. It was a moment so quick it lasted less than 60 seconds. He straightened his coat, smiled briefly, and went into the library without looking back. Sara didn't think much of it at the time. Just another fleeting interaction in the city that never sleeps. She had no idea that the man had noticed crucial details in those few seconds. Her cracked hands, her sunken eyes, the thin coat unsuitable for the harsh winter, and above all, the worn-out school bag that suggested she should be somewhere else entirely. The man entered the library but couldn't get that image out of his head. The girl on the steps wasn't just an ordinary homeless person. She was practically a child. He had worked with at-risk youth for years and recognized the signs, the defensive posture, the gaze that alternated between defiant and desperate, the way she held that backpack as if it were a life preserver. Michael Chen, a literature professor at Columbia University, was used to passing dozens of people on the streets every day. But something about that girl struck him differently. Perhaps it was because she reminded him of his own daughter, or perhaps it was simply the basic humanity he tried to cultivate in his students through the books he taught. He stayed in the library for 15 minutes, but his mind kept returning to those steps. Finally, he made an impulsive decision that contradicted all his usual pragmatism. He grabbed his wallet, bought a hot sandwich and a bottle of water at the snack bar next door, and returned to the steps where he had seen her. To his relief, she was still there, now huddled against the wind that had become even more biting. "Excuse me for bothering you," Michael said in English, his voice gentle but firm. "You helped me a little while ago, and I'd like to return the favor. Please accept this." He extended the sandwich and water, keeping a respectful distance so as not to startle her. Sara looked at him with immediate suspicion. She knew this trick. People offering things, wanting something in return, and that something was never good. But there was something different about this man. Perhaps it was the way he didn't get too close, or how his eyes conveyed genuine concern instead of that condescending pity she hated. "I don't want anything from you," he continued, noticing her hesitation. "Just pay it forward someday when you can." He placed the food on the step beside her and began to walk away. Sara grabbed the sandwich so quickly she almost dropped it, and for a second their eyes met again. In that brief moment, something passed between them. Not pity, not charity, but a basic human recognition that she mattered, that her existence had value. Michael waved slightly and disappeared into the crowd on Fifth Avenue, unaware that those 60 seconds had planted a tiny seed of hope in the parched heart of that girl. And Sara, biting into her hot sandwich with tears streaming down her face, also didn't know that fate had just set in motion a series of events that would transform her life forever. 3 days after the encounter on the library steps, the hunger had become unbearable again. Sara hadn't eaten anything substantial since that sandwich, just a few pieces of stale bread and a half-rotten apple she found. She stood in front of an Italian restaurant in Soho, watching through the window as people dined at cozy tables, laughing, chatting, living normal lives. The smell of garlic and tomatoes emanating from the kitchen was torture, making her stomach churn so loudly that she had to press her arms against her belly. She had sworn to herself that she would never beg directly, that she would at least keep this last shred of dignity. But hunger had a way of destroying all promises. With hands trembling with nervousness and weakness, Sara pushed open the restaurant door and entered, immediately feeling the disapproving stares of the well-dressed patrons. She approached the counter where a burly man in a white apron watched her with a hardened expression, as if he knew exactly what was coming. "Please, sir," Sara whispered in hesitant English, her voice barely audible. I haven't eaten in 3 days. Anything you could spare? I can clean dishes, take out the trash." She hadn't even finished the sentence before the man exploded in an angry outburst that made the entire restaurant stop and stare. "Get out! You homeless kids are always coming here, scaring my customers." He stepped out from behind the counter, his face red with rage, and Sara instinctively recoiled, slamming her hand into a chair. "This is a respectable establishment. We don't serve your kind here." The words were like slaps, each more humiliating than the last. Sara felt tears burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. not in front of all those people who looked at her as if she were trash, a problem to be removed. The owner lunged toward her, and she turned to leave, but in her haste she tripped and fell to her knees on the hard floor. A nervous laugh came from one of the tables, and Sara felt something break inside her. It wasn't just hunger, it was the profound shame of being treated as less than human. She struggled to her feet, her weak legs almost giving way again, and staggered toward the door as the owner continued shouting after her. "And don't come back. I'm calling for the eggs if I see you here again." Words echoed down the street, mingling with the noise of traffic and the indifferent conversations of pedestrians. Sara ran or tried to run with what little energy she had, until she turned a corner and finally stopped, leaning against a brick wall as she sobbed silently. She looked at her dirty hands, her torn coat, and for the first time in months saw herself as others truly saw her. A street girl, a nuisance, someone who didn't even deserve the scraps. The humiliation burned more intensely than the hunger, and Sara seriously wondered how much longer she could continue like this. At that moment, huddled on that cold Soho corner, she thought that perhaps it would be easier to simply give up, to let the cruel New York winter do what seemed inevitable. But something stubborn inside her, some spark that refused to die completely, made her get up once more and keep walking, searching for any place where she could be invisible for another night. The New York Public Library in Midtown became Sara's secret sanctuary during the coldest days of January. She found that if she arrived early, around 9 in the morning, and grabbed a table at the back of the reference section, she could spend hours there undisturbed. The warmth of the heating system was an indescribable luxury after spending nights freezing in the streets, and Sara allowed herself those precious moments where she could simply sit and let her body relax. She had developed a careful technique for blending in. She would always pick up a thick book, usually something about history or geography, and pretend to read with complete concentration. Her dirty clothes and disheveled appearance still attracted occasional glances, but if she remained quiet and appeared to be studying, most of the security guards left her alone. It was a delicate game of invisibility, and Sara had become a master at disappearing among the shelves and tables, just another silent figure in a sea of students and researchers. The library bathrooms were another gift from heaven. She could wash her face and hands with hot water, use paper towels to slightly dry her clothes, and for a few minutes feel almost human again. Sara had memorized the times when the bathrooms were least crowded, usually between 2 and 3 in the afternoon, and she took advantage of those moments to try to clean herself as much as possible. She looked at her reflection in the stained mirror and barely recognized the girl she saw. Tangled hair, deep dark circles under her eyes, lips cracked from the cold, but at least there she was, standing, still fighting, still breathing. Sometimes she allowed herself to daydream, imagining that she was just studying for a test, that in a few hours she would return home where her mother would be preparing dinner. These daydreams were dangerous because they made the return to reality even more painful. But Sara couldn't completely avoid them. They were small acts of resistance against a world that wanted her to forget that she had once had a different life. One day, while pretending to read a book about the American Civil War, Sara realized she was actually absorbing the words on the page. It had been so long since she'd read anything but street signs and discarded menus that the feeling of following a narrative, of learning something new, was strangely comforting. She began to choose books on purpose, survival stories, biographies of people who overcame impossible adversities, anything that could fuel that stubborn spark of hope within her. The library became more than just a place to warm herself. It was a portal to worlds where things made sense, where problems had solutions, where ordinary people did extraordinary things. But there always came a time, usually around 6 o'clock when the library began to close, when Sara had to return to the cold, hostile streets. She carefully put the book away, memorizing the page where she had stopped, knowing she probably wouldn't be able to return to that same book the next day. So she mentally prepared herself, took a deep breath, and went back out into the darkness, carrying for a few more hours the warmth she had absorbed and the stories that momentarily made her forget her own cruel reality. Jennifer Martinez had worked as a social worker in New York City for 15 years, long enough to recognize patterns and identify at-risk youth with just a glance. She was in the library researching resources for one of her cases when she noticed the thin girl sitting alone in the back section, leafing through a book with fingers that trembled slightly. It wasn't uncommon to see homeless people using the library as a refuge, but there was something different about this girl, the way she seemed genuinely absorbed in the book, how how occasionally her lips moved silently as if she were memorizing passages. Jennifer discreetly observed her for several days, always keeping her distance, noting that the girl arrived early and stayed until the last possible minute before closing. She saw how the girl became invisible, how she avoided eye contact with everyone, how her shoulders hunched defensively when someone passed too close. But she also noticed moments of surprising strength, how she held her head high even when clearly exhausted, how meticulously organized her battered backpack, how she never left trash or mess on her desk. It was pure resilience in its rawest form, and Jennifer recognized it because she had seen it before, but rarely in someone so young. On the fourth day of observation, Jennifer witnessed a moment that confirmed her suspicions about the girl's extraordinary character. An elderly man dropped his cane near the table where Sara was sitting, and she immediately stood up to help him, gently holding his arm as he sat down again. The man tried to give her a few dollars in thanks, but Sara refused with a small but genuine smile, shaking her head. Jennifer watched the entire interaction and was impressed. Here was a girl clearly starving, yet refusing offered money because she didn't want to be seen as a beggar. It was pride, yes, but it was also dignity maintained against all odds. Jennifer knew that approaching her would be delicate. Young people on the streets developed super-sensitive antennas to detect social workers, and the last thing she wanted was to scare her away. She needed a plan, an approach that wouldn't trigger all the defensive alarms that girl surely possessed. So Jennifer decided to simply continue observing, waiting for the right moment, building a mental profile of who this girl was and what could help her. In the following days, Jennifer began to notice more details that painted a more complete picture. The girl always chose books on history, science, or biographies, never escapist fiction or magazines. This suggested a mind that was still trying to learn, to grow, not just to survive. Jennifer saw her once using the library's public computer, typing slowly but purposefully, probably looking for information about shelters or resources. She noticed how the girl sometimes closed her eyes and seemed to be doing breathing exercises, self-soothing techniques that many traumatized teenagers used. But what impressed Jennifer most was the silent determination that emanated from that small figure, even when she clearly staggered from weakness. Even when tears glistened in her eyes, she always pulled herself together and continued. Jennifer had worked with hundreds of homeless youth, and many simply gave up, turning to drugs or violence as the only way to cope with the trauma. But this girl was fighting with all her might to keep her humanity intact. Jennifer made a decision at that moment. She was going to help this girl, no matter how long it took to earn her trust. Because if anyone deserved a second chance, it was this young woman who refused to give up, even when everything conspired against her. Sara had already fallen into the trap of hope 3 times, and each fall had been more brutal. The first was shortly after she ran away from the foster home, when a well-dressed woman approached offering help and a safe place to stay. Sara, still naive and desperate, had followed the woman to an apartment in Queens, only to discover it was a disguised trafficking scheme. She escaped by jumping out of a second-story window, twisting her ankle, but considering herself lucky to have gotten out alive. The second time was a pastor from a church in Harlem who promised shelter and meals in exchange for honest work that quickly turned out to be unpaid house cleaning and inappropriate advances that made Sara flee in the middle of the night. The third time was the worst. Another teenager on the streets whom she thought was a friend, who betrayed her by stealing the only $20 she had saved and her backpack with photos of her parents. Each betrayal had hardened another layer around her heart, building walls that grew higher and more impenetrable with each disappointment. Now, whenever someone approached with offers of help, Sara's first thought was always, what do they really want? She developed a complex system of distrust that kept her alive but completely isolated. Any adult who made direct eye contact was immediately suspect. Normal people didn't look at homeless people, so whoever did had a reason. Offers of food were carefully analyzed. Was it packaged, or could it have been tampered with? Did the person want her to go with them to get the food, or were they offering something immediate? Casual conversations were met with monosyllables and carefully rehearsed lies. No, she was 18. No, she had a place to stay. No, she didn't need help. Sara had become an expert at reading body language, at identifying signs of danger before they materialized. She knew when a smile was genuine or predatory, when interest was real concern or calculated manipulation. This constant state of hypervigilance was exhausting, draining precious energy she barely had to spend. but it was the only way to survive in a world that had repeatedly proven it wasn't safe to trust anyone. The emotional scars from those betrayals ran deeper than any physical wound Sara had suffered on the streets. She remembered perfectly the feeling of having hope, of believing that perhaps things would get better, only to have that hope crushed cruelly and calculatedly. It was like touching a hot stove repeatedly. Eventually, you stop putting your hand near the fire, no matter how cold it feels. Sara built a simple survival philosophy. Rely only on herself. Expect the worst from everyone. Never let your guard down. When social workers approached with their cards and promises of help, she smiled politely and disappeared at the first opportunity. When volunteers from religious organizations offered meals at shelters, she ate quickly and left before they started asking questions. The loneliness was painful. The constant distrust was exhausting, but at least she still had control over her own life, even if that life was precarious and brutal. Sara preferred to be alone and aware of the dangers than to trust someone and be betrayed again. This emotional armor did protect her, yes, but it also trapped her in a cycle where genuine help couldn't reach her, where every outstretched hand was seen as a potential threat instead of a bridge to something better. The first foster home was in Brooklyn, an old two-story house with 12 other children and a middle-aged couple who ran the place with cold efficiency. Sara arrived there 3 weeks after the accident, still in shock, still waiting to wake up from the nightmare and discover that her parents were alive. In that house, she quickly learned that grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. Crying attracted bullying from the other children. Showing weakness was an invitation to be targeted. The owner of the house, Mrs. Patterson, had strict rules. Silence after 9, chores before school, no food outside of set times. Sara remembers one particular night when she woke up terribly hungry at 2 in the morning and went downstairs to get a piece of bread. Mrs. Patterson caught her in the kitchen and, as punishment, made her stand in the cold hallway until dawn, shivering in her thin pajamas, learning the hard lesson that in that place, rules mattered more than basic human needs. It was 6 months of mechanical existence where Sara was just another number, another mouth to feed, another problem to manage. The second home was worse in ways Sara still struggled to process. It was in Queens, run by a man named Richard who had an easy smile and hands that wandered where they shouldn't. The other girls in the house had blank stares that Sara instinctively recognized as a sign of unspoken trauma. She only lasted 6 weeks there before Richard began paying special attention to her, entering her room late at night under the pretense of checking in. Sara never let it escalate to the point it obviously had with other girls. She started sleeping with scissors under her pillow and stacking objects against the door. When she reported his behavior to the social worker assigned to her case, she was met with condescending skepticism. Richard was a pillar of the community. She had probably misinterpreted his intentions. This was the most brutal lesson. Even when you tell the truth, even when you ask for help, the system may choose not to believe you because it's easier to protect adults than vulnerable children. The third and final foster home was where Sara finally broke down and decided the streets would be safer. It was a larger facility in the Bronx with over 20 children in cramped bunk beds, run by an organization that was clearly more interested in government checks than the children's well-being. Food was scarce and of poor quality. Clothes were shared until they were in tatters, and supervision was virtually non-existent. What ended up being the last straw was when Sara was accused of stealing another girl's cell phone, a completely false accusation made by an older girl who wanted her bunk by the window. Without investigation, without hearing the other side of the story, Sara was punished by going without food for a day and losing her library privileges. She realized at that moment that no matter how hard she tried to do the right thing, the system was fundamentally broken and she would always be guilty until proven innocent. That night, Sara packed her backpack with the few things that truly mattered and climbed out the bathroom window. As she walked through the dark streets of the early morning, not knowing where to go, she made a promise to herself. She would never again leave her fate in the hands of indifferent adults, never again trust a system that had failed her repeatedly. The streets were dangerous, yes, but at least the danger was honest, not disguised as protection and care. The faded purple backpack was all that remained of Sara's former life, and she treated it with almost religious reverence. It was a JanSport that her mother had bought for the start of 8th grade, still with a small unicorn keychain that now hung by a string. Inside, carefully wrapped in a plastic bag for protection against rain and dirt, were 3 photographs that Sara kept as if they were precious jewels. The first showed her family at the last Christmas they spent together. Her father in that ridiculous reindeer sweater, her mother laughing with her crooked red hat, and Sara in the middle holding the family dog that had died a year before the accident. The second photo was from Sara's 9th grade graduation, taken just 2 months before the tragedy, showing a radiant girl in a light blue dress with immense dreams in her eyes. The third was an old photo of her parents on their wedding day, young and in love, unaware of the horrors the future would bring. Every night before trying to sleep, no matter where she was, Sara would take these photos and look at them in the dim light of the street lamp or the moon, whispering goodnight to the smiling faces that would never age. Those photos were more than memories. They were proof that Sara had been loved, that she had had a real life before everything fell apart. In the darkest moments, when the hunger was unbearable or the cold cut to the bone, she would take the photos and force herself to remember the girl she used to be. "You raised me better than this," she would whisper to the image of her mother, as if she needed to apologize for having fallen so low. But then she would look at her father's smile, that smile that said, "You can do anything," and find the strength for another day. The backpack also held other modest treasures. A brooch that had belonged to her grandmother, a yellowed note her mother had put in her lunchbox years ago saying, "Have a magical day, my love," and the thin silver chain her father had given her on her 13th birthday. Sara knew she could sell these things for money, that the chain would probably be worth enough to feed her for a week, but the idea of getting rid of them was impossible. It would be like selling pieces of her soul, erasing the last evidence that she had been someone other than a nameless street girl. The backpack had become an extension of Sara's own body. She slept with it as a pillow, used it constantly even when it was practically empty, and panicked in the rare moments when she had to leave it somewhere. Once, in a subway station bathroom, someone tried to snatch it while she was washing her face, and Sara fought with a ferocity that surprised even herself, screaming and scratching until the thief gave up and ran away. Afterward, sitting on the cold bathroom floor clutching the backpack to her chest, she realized she would have died defending those photos. They were literally the only reason she was still alive. On particularly lonely nights, Sara talked to the photographs as if her parents could hear her. "I'm trying, Dad. I'm really trying," she would say to the picture of her father at Christmas, tears staining her dirty cheeks. "Mom, I don't know how much longer I can do this." She knew it was a little crazy, that talking to photos didn't bring real answers, but it was the only form of human connection she allowed herself. That battered backpack, with its precious photos and painful memories, was her anchor to humanity. Proof that Sara Rodriguez wasn't just another statistic of homeless youth, but a real person who had been loved, and who, perhaps against all odds, would find a way back to the light. February arrived with brutal blizzards that transformed the streets of New York into a battlefield against the elements. Sara was in her 4th month on the streets, and something fundamental was changing within her. That stubborn spark of hope that kept her fighting was beginning to flicker and weaken. She noticed it in small things. She stopped imagining scenarios where things improved. She stopped making mental plans about how she would return to school. She stopped believing that the encounter on the library steps meant anything more than an isolated moment of human kindness. The cruel mathematics of survival was winning. Her body was too weak, the cold was too intense, and the absolute solidity of her situation began to seem permanent instead of temporary. Sara began to think thoughts that terrified her. What if this is all that's left of my life? What if I die here on the streets and no one ever knows who I was? These thoughts came mainly in the early morning hours, in the darkest hours before dawn, when the cold penetrated to the bone and sleeping seemed dangerously similar to simply giving up. She noticed physical changes that signaled her body was beginning to give up where her mind still struggled. Her fingers were constantly numb now, even when she managed to find warm places. The first signs of damage from cold exposure. A persistent cough had settled in her chest, deep and painful, making her cough until she couldn't breathe. Sara occasionally coughed up blood, but she didn't have money for a doctor and knew that showing up at a hospital emergency room would mean questions, social workers, and possibly being forced back into the system that had failed her. So she simply ignored the warning signs, drank ice water from public fountains, and tried not to think about what it could mean. Her weight had dropped so much that clothes that were already too big now felt like tents on her skeletal body. She avoided mirrors because seeing her own reflection was confronting the reality that she was fading, becoming less substantial with each passing day. But worse than the physical decline was the emotional numbness that was beginning to take hold. Sara found herself no longer feeling anything when people ignored her on the street. no longer getting angry when she was treated like trash, no longer feeling pain when she slept on cold concrete. This numbness frightened her more than the physical pain because it meant she was losing herself, that the Sara who had been loved and had dreams was dying and being replaced by an empty shell focused only on basic animal survival. She stopped going to the library as often because reading about other lives, other worlds, had become too painful. A constant reminder of everything she had lost and would never recover. The photos of her parents that she used to look at every night began to stay in her backpack for days on end because looking at them hurt in ways she no longer had the energy to process. "I'm sorry," Sara whispered one night to her closed backpack, knowing she was apologizing not only to her dead parents, but to the girl she used to be, the girl who believed that good things were still possible. Hope, she was discovering, was a luxury that required energy to maintain, and Sara was simply running out of fuel to feed that flame. Weather forecasts predicted the worst winter storm in a decade, with temperatures dropping to -15 degrees Celsius and winds making the wind chill reach 20 below zero. Sara heard fragments of these forecasts through the windows of electronics stores and conversations of people on the street, and panic began to set in. She had survived the cold until now, but this would be different. This kind of cold killed, literally. The statistics that occasionally appeared in newspaper headlines were brutal. 10, 15, 20 deaths of homeless people during extreme cold spells, bodies found in alleys and under bridges, frozen overnight. Sara knew she could easily become another one of those statistics, another faceless name in an article people would read while drinking hot coffee in their warm homes before going on with their lives. She needed a plan, but all the options seemed impossible or dangerous in different ways. Emergency shelters for the homeless would open during the storm, but Sara knew the stories. Extreme overcrowding, constant robberies, violence, diseases spreading rapidly in enclosed spaces with hundreds of desperate people. And there was always the risk of someone asking questions, of them discovering she was underage, of being forced back into the system. She considered trying to hide in the subway during the worst nights. But the police increased patrols during storms specifically to remove homeless people from the trains, and being caught would mean at least a night at the police station, probably questions about her age and situation. Sara wandered the city looking for alternatives, abandoned buildings that could offer some protection, accessible basements, anywhere with some barrier against the biting wind. But the best places already had owners, other homeless people who defended their territories violently if necessary, and Sara was young, weak, and alone, a combination that made her too vulnerable to compete for scarce resources. Desperation made her consider options she would normally reject without a second thought. She heard from other girls on the streets about places that offered beds and food in exchange for favors, men who paid for companionship, schemes that began with promises of help and ended in situations from which there was no escape. Sara found herself seriously considering these alternatives, weighing in the mental balance whether selling her dignity and safety was worth more than freezing to death in a gutter. The answer should be obvious, but when you're cold enough, hungry enough, desperate enough, the lines you swore you'd never cross begin to seem less absolute. She clutched her backpack to her chest, feeling the outline of her parents' photos through the fabric, and tried to imagine what they would say. "Stay strong, baby girl." She could hear her mother's voice in her memory. "You're stronger than you know." But Sara didn't feel strong. She felt like a terrified 16-year-old girl running out of options as the storm of the century approached. And every wrong decision could be the last she made. Sara had tried to get legitimate work at least a dozen times since she was on the streets, each attempt ending at the same impossibly difficult wall of bureaucracy and practical reality. She went into diners offering to wash dishes, into convenience stores offering to restock shelves, into laundromats asking about any kind of work that didn't require experience. The answer was always some variation of the same. "Do you have ID, social security number, address where we can send the W-2? Sara had none of these things. Her documents had been left with social workers when she ran away from her last foster home, and retrieving them would mean exposing herself to the system again. She tried to explain her situation a few times, but saw the manager's eyes harden with distrust, or worse, with pity, that didn't translate into real help. Hiring someone without documents meant legal trouble, and no small business was willing to take that risk for an obviously homeless girl. She tried informal jobs that didn't require paperwork, handing out flyers on the street, carrying groceries for elderly people at supermarkets, anything that paid in cash at the end of the day. For a few days, she got a job helping a street flower vendor in Union Square. carrying heavy buckets and arranging flowers. The man, an elderly Korean immigrant named Mr. Kim, paid $10 a day and sometimes gave her wilted flowers he wouldn't sell. It was the closest thing to normalcy Sara had had in months, waking up with purpose, having something to do, earning money honestly. But it only lasted a week before city inspectors started pressuring Mr. Kim about licenses and permits, and he had to let her go to avoid further trouble. Sorry, he repeated as he placed an extra $20 in her hand as a parting gift, his eyes showing he understood her desperation but couldn't risk his own livelihood. Sara saved that money like it was gold, making it last 2 whole weeks through fierce discipline. The cruel truth was that the system was set up so that once you fell through the cracks, it was nearly impossible to climb back up. Without a fixed address, Sara couldn't enroll in vocational training programs. Without a phone, she couldn't be contacted for interviews. Without proper clothing, she was judged before she even opened her mouth. And above all, without documents proving who she was, she existed only as a ghost in the system. No official identity, no rights, no clear path forward. She tried going to a library to research how to get copies of her documents, but the processes required money for fees, time waiting in lines at government agencies during business hours, and access to a postal address to receive the documents when ready. Each solution required resources Sara simply didn't have, creating a vicious cycle where she needed work to get off the streets, but needed to be off the streets to get work. Sitting on the steps of yet another store that had rejected her job offer, Sara looked at her empty hands and felt the crushing weight of impossibility. The American dream that your parents had believed in, where hard work led to success, seemed like a cruel joke when you were at rock bottom with no rope to climb out. It was a Thursday in late February when Sara's body finally gave in to what her mind stubbornly refused to accept. She hadn't eaten anything substantial for 3 days, just a piece of bagel found in the trash and water from public fountains. The dizziness had become constant, a permanent ringing in her ears that made the world seem underwater. Sara was walking down Fifth Avenue near the library where she usually took refuge, when her knees simply gave way without warning. She tried to grab onto a lamppost, but her hands wouldn't obey, and suddenly she was falling, the world spinning in slow motion. The impact against the icy concrete was a dull thud that she felt more than heard, and then darkness began to swallow the edges of her vision. The last thing Sara registered before losing consciousness completely was the sound of hurried footsteps moving away from her. People afraid to engage. People too rushed to stop. People who had learned not to see the suffering right in front of them. For a few precious minutes, Sara lay there on the busy sidewalk while hundreds of people passed around her like water flowing around a stone. Some glanced quickly and looked away, uncomfortable with the visual evidence that bad things were happening in their city. Others didn't even notice, absorbed in their phones or conversations, their brains trained to filter out what they didn't want to see. One woman stopped for a second, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone to call for help, but then she saw the battered backpack and dirty clothes and hesitated. Homeless, probably on drugs, not my problem. She moved on, the small spark of compassion stifled by the convenience of not getting involved. A teenager with headphones almost tripped over Sara's body and cursed angrily, as if she had chosen to faint there just to ruin his day. It was a perfect demonstration of how society had become adept at dehumanizing the vulnerable, at turning people into invisible problems that could be ignored until someone from the city hall cleaned them off the streets. But then, like an echo of an encounter that had happened weeks before, a familiar voice cut through the fog of Sara's unconsciousness. "Oh my God, it's her!" Michael Chen had just left the library when he saw the small group of people crowding around something on the sidewalk. His heart raced when he recognized the faded purple backpack, the same one the girl from the steps had been carrying. He pushed through the small crowd of onlookers and fell to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he checked her pulse on her thin neck. It was there, weak but present. "Call 911, now!" he yelled to the crowd, but no one moved, all trapped in that modern paralysis of not wanting to get involved. Michael pulled out his own phone, dialing emergency as he took off his coat and covered Sara's trembling body. "Hold on, kid," he whispered, recognizing in her the same girl who had helped him on the stairs, the same one who had refused money from the old man in the library that Jennifer had observed. Michael didn't know all the details of her story yet, but he knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't going to leave her there to die in the collective indifference of a city that had forgotten how to care for its most vulnerable. The ambulance took 12 minutes to arrive, and Michael knelt beside Sara the entire time, holding her cold hand and speaking softly to keep her connected to the consciousness that flickered in and out. He saw her eyes briefly open, confused and terrified, trying to understand where she was and why a stranger was holding her. Hey, it's okay," Michael said softly, recognizing the panic that precedes the escape of someone traumatized. "You fainted. Help is coming. You're safe." Sara tried to stand, instinct screaming that she needed to run, but her body wouldn't respond to commands. The weakness was so complete that she could only turn her head, searching for her backpack with wild eyes. "Your bag is right here," Michael said, positioning it where Sara could see it, understanding without words that that backpack meant more than just belongings. When the ambulance finally arrived, sirens cutting through the cold February air, Michael insisted on going along, refusing to leave her alone with strangers when she obviously trusted no one. At Mount Sinai Hospital, doctors quickly diagnosed severe malnutrition, dehydration, early hypothermia, and possible pneumonia. Sara was semi-conscious, weakly resisting as they tried to insert an IV into her arm, murmuring, "No, please," in a hoarse voice. Michael stood beside the gurney, his presence strangely calming even though she barely knew him. "They're trying to help," he said when her eyes turned to him in silent pleading. "I know you don't trust anyone. I get it, but you're going to die if you don't let them help you." Something in the brutal honesty of those words pierced Sara's fog of fear. She stopped resisting, tears streaming silently as the doctors worked. A hospital social worker appeared with his inevitable clipboard, beginning the standard interrogation: full name, date of birth, emergency contact, address. Sara looked at Michael with eyes that clearly said, "I told you so, this always happens." And he saw the exact moment she decided she had to run away as soon as she had enough strength. Michael made a life-changing decision in that moment. He turned to the social worker and stated with an authority he didn't know he possessed, "She's staying with me. I'm her uncle, temporary guardian while her parents are abroad." It was a blatant lie that could cause serious problems, but something about the situation demanded immediate action, and the truth would only lead Sara back to the system that had failed her. The social worker looked skeptically between Michael and Sara, clearly not believing the story, but also clearly too overwhelmed to investigate deeply at that moment. "We'll need documentation," she said wearily. "Bring it when she's discharged. For now, she needs to stay in the hospital for at least 48 hours for stabilization." When the social worker left, Sara looked at Michael with a mixture of confusion, distrust, and what might be the tiny beginning of hope. "Why?" was all she managed to whisper. Michael sat in the chair beside the bed, thinking about how to respond. He thought of his own daughter, the same age, living comfortably in Seattle with his ex-wife. He thought of all the lessons about empathy and social justice he taught his students, but rarely put into practice. "Because someone should," he finally said. "Because you helped me up those steps without even knowing me. And because," he paused, meeting her eyes, "because I think you deserve a chance that no one is giving you." During the 2 days Sara spent in the hospital, Michael visited 3 times, always bringing small things she needed: a comb, new toothpaste, a clean shirt in a size that actually fit. He didn't make grand gestures or elaborate promises. He just showed up, sat in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, and sometimes talked about mundane things that didn't require her to reveal anything about herself. On the second visit, Sara finally asked who he really was, not the temporary uncle from the hospital lie, but who he truly was. Michael smiled for the first time since the rescue, a tired smile that touched his eyes. "My name is Michael Chen. I teach English literature at Columbia University. I'm 47 years old. Divorced? I have a daughter your age who lives with her mom in Seattle." He paused, thinking about how to continue. "I'm not a hero. I'm not even particularly good at helping people. But I saw you on the steps, and then in the library, and when you fell, I couldn't just walk away." His disarming honesty was unlike any adult who had tried to help Sara before. There was no visible hidden agenda, no attempt to appear saintly, just a man admitting he was improvising. Sara processed this information silently, her eyes studying Michael's face, searching for signs of deceit or manipulation she had learned to identify. She noticed details she had missed during the chaos of the rescue: the way his glasses were always slightly crooked on his nose, his habit of rubbing his temple when he was thinking, how his clothes were practical and slightly disheveled, like someone who didn't care much about appearances. He had an honest face, she decided, The kind of face that had seen a lot of life and developed genuine laugh lines. "Why do you care?" Sara asked suddenly, her voice stronger now after 2 days of intravenous nutrition and rest. "You don't know me. For all you know, I could be a criminal, or a drug addict, or..." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "Or just not worth the trouble." Michael leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees, and looked at her with an intensity that wasn't uncomfortable, but deeply caring. "You want to know what I saw when you helped me on those steps?" He began, his voice soft but firm. "I saw a girl who was clearly suffering, but still had the reflexes to help a stranger. I saw someone who refused money because she had pride and dignity, even when she was starving. I saw," he chose his next words carefully, "someone who reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place. To help young people who have potential but need someone to believe in them." He pulled a chair closer. "Look, Sara, and yes, I know your name because the doctor said so. I'm not pretending I have all the answers. I don't know how to fix your situation, but I know you fainted from hunger in one of the richest cities in the world, and that's wrong on a fundamental level. So here's what I propose." Michael took a deep breath, knowing he was about to offer something that would change his own life as well. "When you leave here, come stay at my apartment, temporarily," he added quickly, seeing the panic begin in her eyes. "I have a guest room that I never use. You'd have privacy, food, a safe place while we figure out our next steps. No strings attached. If you want to leave any time, you can." Sara looked at him as if he'd just spoken in an alien language, her brain struggling to process an offer that seemed too good to be true. Because in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true always came with terrible hidden prices. It took 3 days after Sara left the hospital before she finally told Michael the whole story. She was living in his modest apartment in Morningside Heights, still wary, still sleeping fully clothed with her backpack within arm's reach, still ready to flee at the first sign of danger. But slowly, through silent dinners and careful conversations, something began to melt away. It was one night when Michael was grading papers at the kitchen table and Sara was curled up on the sofa with a book she'd taken from his shelf, To Kill a Mockingbird, ironically about justice and iniquity, that she began to speak. First, just fragments. "My parents died 2 years ago. Car accident." Michael didn't press, just nodded and continued grading, giving her space to go on at her own pace. "Foster care was bad, so I ran." More silence. Then the heart of the pain. "On the streets for 4 months. Tried to survive. Obviously didn't do a great job." A bitter laugh escaped that sounded more like a sob. Over the next few hours, the full story emerged in painful waves. The accident that took everything from her in seconds. The foster homes that should have protected her but abused her. The crushing loneliness of being invisible in a city of millions. The hunger that hurt in ways words couldn't capture. Michael stopped grading papers altogether and just listened, his heart breaking with every detail. Sara spoke about the photos in her backpack, about how she talked to her dead parents, about the moments when she considered simply giving up because continuing to fight seemed too impossible. She spoke about the betrayals, about adults who should have helped but hurt her, about how she had built walls because trusting meant being destroyed again. "So now you know the whole story," Sara finally said, her voice exhausted from the emotional catharsis. "Still think I'm worth saving?" There was defiance in those words, but also raw vulnerability. She had been hoping Michael would give up on her now that he knew all the baggage, all the trauma, all the impossible complexity of fixing her broken life. Michael remained silent for a long moment, not for lack of words, but because he was trying not to cry in front of her. This child had lived through more trauma in 16 years than most people in a lifetime. Finally he spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Sara, what happened to you? None of it was your fault. Not the accident, not foster care failing you, not ending up on the streets. The system failed you at every possible turn." He took off his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. "You ask if I think you're worth saving? You've already saved yourself. You survived 4 months on the streets of New York in the winter. You kept your humanity when it would have been easier to lose it. You still have enough hope to tell your story to me, even though I have every reason not to trust you." He stood and moved to sit in the chair opposite the sofa, maintaining a respectful distance but making direct eye contact. "Here's what I see. I see an extraordinarily resilient young woman who deserves every chance that was denied to her. And if you let me, I want to help you get those chances back. Not because I'm some saint, but because it's simply the right thing to do." That night, for the first time since the accident, Sara slept soundly and without nightmares, her subconscious finally accepting that maybe, just maybe, she had found someone who truly cared without wanting anything in return, other than to see her thrive. The next morning, Michael woke before dawn with a plan forming in his mind. He made strong coffee and began making detailed lists. Something his students joked was his answer to any of life's problems. List 1, documents Sara would need. List 2, available legal and social resources. List 3, steps for school reintegration. When Sara emerged from the guest room around 8, still wearing borrowed clothes that were too big, she found Michael surrounded by papers and with his laptop open in multiple tabs. "Good morning," he said, pushing a mug of hot chocolate toward her. He'd noticed she avoided coffee. "So, I've been thinking. If you really want to rebuild your life, we need a concrete plan. Step by step. Nothing overwhelming, just one step at a time." He turned the laptop to show a meticulously organized spreadsheet that would have been comical if it weren't so poignant in its sincerity. Sara looked at the screen, then at Michael, trying to understand why this stranger was investing so much effort in her. The first step, Michael explained, was to retrieve Sara's identity documents. Her birth certificate, social security number, school records, everything the bureaucratic system would require to acknowledge her legal existence. "I called a lawyer friend who does pro bono work," Michael said, ticking items off a list. "He agreed to help us navigate the process. I also contacted an independent social worker, not someone connected to the system that failed you," he added quickly, seeing Sara tense, "but someone who specializes in helping young people who fell through the cracks." Michael slid a calendar across the table. "Here's what I'm proposing. The next 2 weeks we focus on documents, get you officially existing again. Then," he pointed to week 3, "we start looking at school options. GED program maybe, or if your grades were good before, we can explore getting you back into high school." He paused, studying Sara's face. "This doesn't happen overnight. It's going to be hard work, lots of frustration with bureaucracy. But you're not alone in this. I'm in for the long haul if you want my help." Sara sat down slowly, her fingers encircling the warm mug of hot chocolate, the steam rising between them like a thin curtain. She wanted to believe what Michael was offering, wanted it so desperately it physically hurt, but fear was stronger. Fear of hope, fear of disappointment, fear that this kind man would eventually realize she was too much work, too broken, too complicated. "What if," she began, then stopped. Michael waited patiently. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm too far behind? Or too messed up, or—" Her voice broke. Michael took off his glasses, cleaned them meticulously, a nervous habit Sara was beginning to recognize, and put them back on. "Then we figure out a different plan," he said simply. "Sara, there isn't a single right path here. If traditional school doesn't work, there are alternatives. If one plan fails, we make another. The only thing that isn't an option is giving up before even trying." He pushed the contact list toward her. "These are people who want to help. My lawyer friend, the social worker, a counselor at Columbia who works with at-risk youth. I'm not doing this alone, and you're definitely not doing this alone. We're building a team." For the first time since the accident that killed her parents, Sara felt something she had forgotten how to name. Not exactly hope yet, but perhaps the possibility of hope. The idea that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back to the life she had lost. On the third night in Michael's apartment, panic finally overtook Sara. She woke at 3 in the morning from a nightmare where she was back on the streets. But this time, Michael was laughing at her along with everyone else, his kindness revealed as an elaborate, cruel joke. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it, and the room that had begun to feel safe suddenly felt like a trap. All the past experiences screamed in her mind. This was exactly how it had started with Richard in the second foster home, with kindness and promises before the true intentions were revealed. Sara stood silently, grabbed her already packed backpack, she had never really unpacked it, and moved toward the apartment door. Her fingers trembled on the latch when she heard a sound coming from the living room. She froze, every muscle tense, prepared to run or fight. But it was just Michael, asleep on the sofa, surrounded by papers, his laptop still open displaying forms for birth certificate requests. He had stayed up working on her case, and the visual evidence of it made her pause. Sara stood there in the darkness for long minutes, torn between the instinct to flee and the tiny possibility that perhaps this time would be different. She looked at Michael sleeping awkwardly on the sofa. He had clearly fallen asleep working, his glasses crooked on his face, his posture suggesting he would wake up with a sore neck. There was nothing threatening about him, nothing that would trigger the alarm she had learned to trust. But the fear wasn't logical, it was visceral, born of repeated traumas that taught her that trust led to pain. She took a step toward the door, then stopped again. If she ran now, where would she go? Back to the streets that had almost killed her, back to the cold and hunger and endless despair. And if, just if, Michael was being genuine, would she be throwing away the only real chance she'd had in 2 years? The war inside her was almost physical, pulling her in opposite directions with equal force. Finally, Sara stepped back from the doorway and sat in the kitchen chair, still clutching her backpack to her chest, deciding she would stay awake until dawn to see what Michael would do when he woke. If there was any sign of danger, any change in his behavior, she would run. But she owed him at least to wait until daylight. The hours passed slowly, Sara watching Michael sleep and the numbers on the microwave clock incrementally changing. Around 6, he stirred and woke, blinking confusedly before seeing Sara sitting there stiffly with her backpack. For a second, something crossed his face, understanding and also sadness. "You were going to leave," he said softly, not a question, but a statement. Sara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Michael sat up slowly, rubbing his neck with a grimace. "I understand. I really understand. After everything that happened to you, it would be crazy to trust me." He paused, thinking. "So here's what we're going to do. You stay or you go. Your choice, always. But if you stay, we can establish ground rules that make you feel safe. I can give you a key to the apartment. You can lock your door. You can leave whenever you want. And," he took a deep breath, "if you need proof of my intentions, come to my office at Columbia tomorrow. Meet my colleagues. See that I'm exactly who I say I am." Sara finally released some of the air she'd been holding, her shoulders lowering slightly. "I want to trust you," she whispered. "I just don't know how anymore." Michael nodded, his eyes welling up behind his glasses. "Then let me prove it, one day at a time. You don't have to decide everything now. Just don't rush yet. Give me a chance to show that not everyone broke their promises." Later that morning, after a quiet breakfast where they both avoided the emotional elephant in the room, Michael did something none of the other adults in Sara's life had ever done. He offered complete transparency without being asked. "Before we move forward," he said, placing a folder on the kitchen table, "I want you to know exactly who you're dealing with. No secrets, no surprises." He opened the folder and began pulling out documents one by one. "This is my Columbia diploma, my teaching credentials, my current employment contract. Here's my background check from the university. They do it on all professors. Clean record, nothing suspicious." He placed each page where Sara could clearly see them. "This is the lease on the apartment in my name. Bills, bank statements showing I'm not in financial trouble trying to exploit you somehow. And this," he paused on the last document, "this is the number of my lawyer friend, David Torres. He's expecting your call if you want to verify anything about me or discuss legal options independently." Michael shoved everything towards Sara. "Look through everything. Take pictures if you want. Call anyone you need to call. I want you to feel safe here. And that means you need to trust that I am who I say I am." Sara stared at the stack of documents as if they were alien artifacts. No one had ever offered this level of transparency. Adults usually expected blind trust based on authority or position. She slowly flipped through the papers, her eyes scanning each one. Michael's Columbia ID photo showed the same tired but gentle face, the same slightly distracted expression. His bank statements showed a modest professor's salary, regular rent and utility payments, occasional donations to charities, nothing to suggest instability or ulterior motives. The background check was clean, exactly as he said. "You didn't have to show me all this," Sara finally said, her voice small. Michael adjusted his glasses, that nervous gesture again. "Yes, I did. Because you were lied to and taken advantage of too many times. The only way we move forward is if you have zero doubts about my intentions. And honestly," he added with a small smile, "I'd be worried if you weren't suspicious. It would mean you hadn't learned to protect yourself." He didn't stop there. Michael picked up his phone and made a call, putting it on speakerphone. "David, it's Michael. I have Sara here with me. Can you explain to her who you are and what we're trying to do?" The voice that came from the phone was warm and professional. "Hi, Sara. My name is David Torres. I'm an immigration and civil rights attorney with Torres and Associates. Michael asked me to help pro bono with his case, specifically helping you recover documents Navigate the system and possibly pursue any assets that may be rightfully yours from your parents' estate. I want you to know that anything we discuss is confidential, and you are my client, not Michael. He can't tell me what to do on your behalf. Only you can. Do you have any questions for me? Sara, surprised to be put directly in contact with the lawyer, hesitated. This is really free? Nobody will charge me later. David laughed gently. Completely free. I do a few hours of pro bono work every month because I believe in a justice system being accessible to everyone, not just people who can pay. You qualify for this help. No strings attached. After a few more minutes of conversation where David patiently answered each of Sara's skeptical questions, he scheduled an appointment for her at his office the following week. When Michael hung up, Sara looked at him with what could be the beginning of genuine trust. Why? She asked for the 100th time, but this time with less accusation. Because, Michael said simply, this is what basic decency looks like, and because you deserve to see that not everyone will hurt you. Some people really do just want to help. It was during the meeting with David Torres the following week that something fundamental shifted within Sara. The office was in a modest building in the financial district, and when she entered, accompanied by Michael, who waited in the reception area for privacy, she was still braced for disappointment. But David greeted her with a dignity no official adult had offered since her parents' death. He didn't speak condescendingly, didn't make assumptions, just asked direct questions and listened attentively to the answers. Okay, Sara, he said after taking extensive notes. Here's the honest situation. It's going to take time. Bureaucracy moves slow, especially when dealing with estates and lost documents. But, he leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. You have a case. Your parents had life insurance. A 401k, the house that was sold. That money supposedly went into a trust for you, but it seems no one bothered to ensure you had access when needed. That's legal negligence at the very least, possibly actionable. He paused, letting the information process. I'm not promising millions or an overnight solution, but I am promising that you have rights, and I will fight to get what is rightfully yours. Sara felt something strange stirring in her chest, a sensation she barely recognized anymore. It was hope, real and tangible, not the desperate version that had clung to her in the streets, but something more solid. How long? She asked, her voice trembling. To get my documents, to maybe have some money for school. David didn't soften the reality. Documents we can have in a few weeks to a month if everything goes smooth. The trust and financial assets? That could take months, maybe even a year, depending on how complicated the estate is and how much resistance we encounter. But here's the important thing. He pulled out a printed paper. I filed an emergency motion today to have you declared an emancipated minor temporarily. If approved, this gives you the legal rights of an adult while you're still technically a minor. It means you can sign documents, enroll in school, open a bank account, basically function independently while we sort out the rest. He slid the paper to her. The hearing is in 2 weeks. I need you to be prepared to tell the judge your story. The abuse, why you ran, why emancipation is in your best interest. It won't be easy, but it's the fastest path to giving you control over your own life. When Sara left David's office, Michael rose from the reception chair where he had been reading a book. He saw something different in her face. Her shoulders were less hunched, her eyes less haunted. How did it go? He asked carefully. Sara looked at him, and for the first time since the accident, a genuine smile, small but real, touched her lips. He thinks he can help me. Like, really help. Not just promises, but concrete steps and timelines and... She paused, emotion threatening to overflow. He called me by my last name, Ms. Rodriguez, as if I were a real person. Not just some homeless kid. Michael felt his own chest tighten. You are a real person. You always were. It's the rest of the world that forgot to see that. As they walked back to the subway together, Sara tried to process the enormity of what was happening. For the first time in 2 years, there was a plan. Not just surviving until the next day, but actually moving forward. Papers, emancipation, school, maybe even some of her parents' money that was rightfully hers. It was overwhelming and terrifying and thrilling all at the same time. Michael? She said quietly as they waited for the train. Yeah? Thank you. For not giving up on me when I almost ran away. For seeing me when everyone else looked right through. Michael placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. A paternal gesture that 2 months ago would have made her recoil but now felt safe. Sara, you made it easy to see you. All I did was pay attention. The hard part, surviving, maintaining your humanity, still wanting a better life. That was all you. As the train arrived and they boarded, Sara looked at her reflection in the dark subway window and for a moment saw not the broken, homeless girl, but the person she could become again, someone with a future, with possibilities, with hope. In the days following her meeting with David, Michael began activating a network of resources Sara didn't even know existed. He took her to meet Melissa Wang, a counselor specializing in homeless youth who worked with a nonprofit called the New Beginnings Coalition. The office was small but welcoming, with comfortable chairs and motivational posters that somehow didn't seem cheesy, just genuine. Melissa was in her 30s with a discreet nose piercing and an energy that was professional but never cold. "Sara, I've worked with hundreds of young people in your situation," she began, not wasting time on unnecessary small talk. "And the first thing I want you to know is that this isn't your fault. Second thing, there's help available if you want to accept it, but it has to be your choice. I'm not here to force anything on you." Sara appreciated the straightforward honesty, so different from the social workers in the system who treated young people as problems to be processed instead of individuals with agency. Melissa opened a folder and began explaining available programs. Some Sara could qualify for now, others that would become accessible once emancipation was approved. There was a housing program for transitioning youth that offered supervised, shared apartments with subsidized rent and caseworker support. "It's not perfect," Melissa admitted. "There are rules like curfew and mandatory check-ins, but it's safe and warm, and you'd have your own space." There were educational programs specifically designed for young people with gaps in their schooling, GED prep with free tutoring, college prep for those who qualified, even vocational training in various fields. "We also have a mentoring program," Melissa continued, "where young adults who have been through similar situations offer guidance. They get it in a way that adults who have never experienced this don't." She slid several brochures across the table. "And there are support groups, other people your age who've been on the streets. Sometimes just talking to someone who really understands can make all the difference." Sara flipped through the materials, her mind spinning with possibilities that seemed surreal after months of thinking only about basic survival. Michael had remained quiet for most of the meeting, letting Melissa and Sara talk, but now he leaned forward. "What about therapy? I know Sara has been through significant trauma." Melissa nodded. "Absolutely. We partner with several therapists who work pro bono or sliding scale with our young people. Trauma-informed care, specifically. Some specialize in grief, others in PTSD, homelessness, and abuse." She looked directly at Sara. "Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Therapy can be hard, bringing up painful things, but it's also one of the most important tools for actually moving forward instead of just surviving." Sara felt instinctive resistance. The idea of sitting with a stranger and unearthing all the trauma seemed impossible. But a small part of her, the part that was beginning to believe there might be a way forward, whispered that perhaps Melissa was right. I'll think about it," Sara finally said. Melissa smiled, genuine and warm. "That's all I'm asking. You don't have to decide everything today. In fact, I'd prefer you didn't decide. Take your time. Think about what makes sense to you. My door is always open, and these resources will still be here when you're ready." As they left the office, Sara held a folder full of information and contact numbers, a tangible lifeline to a world of support she didn't know existed, hidden in the shadows of the same city that had been so brutal to her on the streets. The emancipation hearing was 2 weeks later, and Sara spent each day leading up to it in a state of growing anxiety. Michael helped her practice her testimony. David prepared her for possible questions from the judge, but nothing could truly prepare her to sit in a courtroom and expose her deepest wounds for strangers to assess. The day arrived cold and gray, appropriately somber. Sara wore borrowed clothes that Michael had bought. Simple black trousers, a white blouse, a blazer that was slightly oversized but made her look older, more composed than she felt. In court, David presented the case with impressive legal precision, documenting every failure of the foster care system, every danger Sara had faced, building an irrefutable argument that emancipation was not only appropriate, but necessary for her safety. Then it was Sara's turn. Her voice trembled as she began, but as she told her story, edited but honest, something happened. She stopped feeling shame and began to feel anger at the injustice of it all. Her voice grew stronger as she described sleeping in abandoned shelters, firmer as she explained why she had to run away. The judge, a middle-aged black woman with eyes that had seen many cases but had not lost compassion, listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Sara finished, there was a heavy silence in the courtroom. Then the judge spoke. "Ms. Rodriguez, this court has reviewed your case extensively. While emancipation is a serious step that we do not take lightly, I find that in your circumstances, it is indeed in your best interest." The gavel fell. Motion approved. You are hereby declared an emancipated minor with all rights and responsibilities attendant thereto. Good luck, young lady. I hope you take advantage of this second chance. Sara felt her knees go weak with relief and had to hold on to the table. It was done. She was legally an adult now, free to make decisions about her own life. David shook her hand professionally, but his eyes shone with satisfaction. Michael, seated in the gallery, had to quickly wipe his glasses to hide tears. Outside the courthouse, Sara simply stood on the steps for a moment, letting the cold air fill her lungs. "I'm free," she whispered, and then louder. "I'm actually free." The irony wasn't lost. It had taken losing everything to finally gain control of her own life. With emancipation guaranteed, doors began to open. Melissa from the New Beginnings Coalition found Sara a spot in a transitional living program in Queens, a small apartment shared with 2 other young women, both also working to rebuild their lives after homelessness. The place had a caseworker who checked weekly, rules about curfew and visitors, but also privacy, safety, and a real bed with clean sheets. Sara moved in the following week, carrying her battered backpack and 2 bags of clothes that Michael had helped her buy at thrift stores. Her roommates, Carmen, 20, and Jade, 19, greeted her with cautious friendliness. "Welcome to the club nobody wants to be a part of," Carmen said with a wry smile that hid a lot of pain. For the first time, Sara was surrounded by people who truly understood. Not pity, not morbid curiosity, but genuine comprehension born of similar experience. That first night, lying in her own bed in a room that locked from the inside, Sara cried, not from sadness but from overwhelming relief. She had survived. Against all odds, she really had survived. And simultaneously, Sara enrolled in an accelerated GED program through Melissa's organization. Classes were 3 times a week at a community center, with teachers who specialized in working with students who had significant gaps in their education. She was nervous on the first day, worried that she would be far behind, that years of trauma had destroyed her ability to learn. But when she sat down and opened a textbook for the first time in 2 years, something clicked. Her brain, starved for mental stimulation during months of just surviving, absorbed information like a sponge. Math was challenging after so much time away, but reading and writing came naturally. All those days in the library hadn't been wasted. Her teacher, Mr. Patterson, noticed immediately. "You have a really sharp mind," he said after the first week. "With work, you can have your GED in 6 months, maybe less. Ever thought about college?" College. The word seemed impossible, a dream of a different life. But Sara was beginning to learn that maybe impossible was just a word people used when they didn't have enough hope to try. The following weeks brought a series of small victories that individually seemed insignificant, but collectively began to rebuild Sara's sense of self-worth that had been systematically destroyed. The first was receiving her birth certificate and temporary identity card in the mail. Official documents proving that Sara Rodriguez existed, that she was a real person with a date of birth and legal rights. She held that piece of plastic with her photo and information and felt something fundamental shift inside her. "I'm real," she whispered to Carmen, who understood the enormity of that moment in a way that outsiders never could. The second victory was her first paycheck from a part-time job that Melissa helped her get, working 3 afternoons a week at a small bookstore in the East Village. The money was modest, $8.50 an hour, but when Sara held that first check with her name on it, she felt genuine pride for the first time in years. She had earned it through honest work. No one had given it out of pity or expecting anything in return. The victories continued, building momentum. Sara passed her first practice GED test with surprisingly high scores, especially in reading comprehension and writing. Mr. Patterson called her after class to say that if she kept up that pace, she could test for the real GED in 4 months instead of 6. She made a real friend, not just roommates being civil, but a genuine friendship. When Carmen invited her to see a movie together, and afterward they stayed up until 2 in the morning talking about dreams and fears and all the baggage they carried. It was the first time in 2 years that Sara had opened up to someone close to her age, and the connection was healing in ways that therapy, which she still resisted, could never be. Michael took her out to dinner to celebrate 2 months since they met on the library steps, And in that unassuming restaurant, Sara realized she was laughing, genuinely laughing at a silly joke Michael made. And the feeling was so strange, so far removed from the person she had been on the streets, that for a moment she almost didn't recognize herself. But perhaps the greatest victory, the one that truly signaled a fundamental shift, came on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. Sara was walking home from work when she saw a homeless woman sitting in a corner, obviously in distress. 2 months ago, even 2 weeks ago, Sara would have walked past, protecting her own fragile trauma, unable to face a reminder of where she herself had been. But this time she stopped. She pulled $5 from her paycheck, money she needed, money she was carefully saving, and a granola bar from her bag. "Here," she said softly, crouching down to make eye contact. "I know it's not much, but I've been where you are. It gets better. I promise you, it can get better." The woman took the money and food with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears. "Bless you, child," she whispered. Sara walked away feeling something profound, not just sympathy, but genuine compassion, and more importantly, the ability to help someone else when for so long she had been the only one needing help. That night, she looked in the mirror of the shared bathroom in the transitional housing and truly saw herself for the first time in months. Her eyes still had shadows, her body was still too thin, but there was something different. There was life there, hope, the possibility of a future. "You're going to make it," she whispered to her reflection. "You're actually going to make it." And for the first time, she truly believed it. The therapy Sara had resisted finally began in March, not because she suddenly wanted it, but because nightmares had become unbearable. Even in the safety of transitional housing, she woke up screaming several nights a week, vivid dreams of the accident, of Richard's face coming toward the room, of freezing in the streets. Carmen and Jade were understanding, but Sara knew it wasn't fair to them. Melissa connected her with Dr. Sarah Kim, a therapist who specialized in complex trauma and adolescence. The first session was excruciating. Sara sat in the comfortable chair in the small office and waited for Dr. Kim to ask invasive questions, to force her to relive everything. But instead, Dr. Kim simply asked, "What do you need from me? How can I make this feel safe for you?" No one had ever asked that before. What Sara needed, not what the system determined she should have. It took 3 sessions before Sara really started talking. But when she did, it was like a dam breaking down. All the trauma she had packed down, all the tears she had refused to cry in the streets because crying was a luxury she couldn't afford, it all came pouring out. Dr. Kim guided her through techniques to process trauma without being re-traumatized, grounding exercises when flashbacks came, ways to separate the past from the present. Sara learned that her nightmares, her constant hypervigilance, her inability to trust, all were normal responses to abnormal circumstances, not signs that she was broken beyond repair. Your brain was protecting you in the only way it knew how, Dr. Kim explained. Everything you did to survive, the distrust, the numbness, even running away from the system, were adaptive strategies. They kept you alive. The work now is to learn new strategies for when you are actually safe. But the real breakthrough, the moment that shifted everything, came in the 6th session when Dr. Kim suggested EMDR therapy to process the accident. Sara had avoided talking about that day in detail, skating around it. But now, Dr. Kim gently pushed, the trauma lives in your body until you fully process it. I know it's terrifying, but I'll be here with you through all of it. The session was brutal. Sara had to relive every second of the accident. The rain, her mother's scream, the impact, waking up to find her parents dead in the front seats. She sobbed so hard she couldn't breathe, her whole body shaking with the force of 2 years of grief finally being released. Dr. Kim stayed present, grounding her when she dissociated, reminding her that she was safe in the office, that it was memory not happening now. When it finally ended, Sara was exhausted but also, somehow lighter. I couldn't save them. She finally said aloud what she had carried silently all this time. I was right there and I couldn't do anything. Dr. Kim leaned forward, her voice firm but compassionate. You were 14 years old in a car accident. There was nothing you could have done. Nothing. The guilt you've been carrying, it's not yours to carry. The accident wasn't your fault. Foster care failing you wasn't your fault. Ending up in the streets wasn't your fault. None of it was ever your fault. Sara shook her head, resisting. But if I had been different, stronger, smarter... Stop, Dr. Kim interrupted gently. You survived a trauma that would have destroyed many adults. You kept your humanity in circumstances that would have broken most people. You were strong enough, You were always strong enough. The world failed you. Sara, you didn't fail the world." Those words, simple yet profound, cracked open something in Sara that had been sealed tight with shame and self-blame. She left that session emotionally raw, but also fundamentally changed. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved all the good things that were beginning to happen. That she wasn't damaged goods but a survivor, entitled to healing and happiness and a future. In April, almost 6 months after the accident, David Torres called with news that Sara had been dreading and simultaneously needing. "The insurance company is finally processing the claim," he explained, his voice careful. "But they're contesting some aspects. They need your official statement about the accident. What happened, timeline, everything. I know it's difficult, but it's necessary to move forward with the settlement." Sara felt her stomach drop. She had just begun to process the trauma with Dr. Kim, and now she would have to relive it all again. This time in a cold legal setting with strangers judging her every word. "When?" she asked, her voice smaller than intended. "Next week. I'll be there with you every step of the way. And Sara, this isn't about them not believing you. It's standard procedure. Just tell the truth exactly as you remember. That's all they can ask." But Sara knew that telling the truth meant opening wounds that had barely begun to heal, exposing the most painful part of her life to the scrutiny of people who only saw numbers and liability instead of a destroyed family. The deposition took place in a sterile conference room in a midtown law office. Sara sat at one end of a long table, David beside her, facing 3 people, 2 lawyers from the insurance company and a court reporter. They made her swear to tell the truth, and then the questions began. Clinically, detached. "State your full name for the record. What was your relationship with the deceased? Describe the events of June 15th, 2023, starting in the morning." Sara's voice shook as she began, but David gently touched her arm, a reminder that she was safe, that he was there. She told everything: the happy breakfast, the beginning of the journey, the sudden storm, the truck crossing the median. Her voice broke when she described the impact, and she had to pause several times to compose herself. The insurance company lawyers remained expressionless, occasionally interrupting with technical questions that seemed designed to confuse or contradict. "Are you certain about the time? Could your father have been driving above the speed limit? Did you see which vehicle crossed first?" Sara wanted to scream that she was 14 and traumatized. That memory trauma doesn't work like that, but David had prepared her for it. "I'm telling you what I remember," she said, more firmly than she felt. "My parents weren't at fault. The truck driver lost control. That's what happened." After 2 hours of grilling that felt more like an interrogation than a deposition, they finally finished. Sara was emotionally exhausted, her body trembling with adrenaline and the effort of maintaining composure. One of the insurance lawyers, an older woman with perfectly styled hair, shuffled her papers and said something that made Sara's blood run cold. "Ms. Rodriguez, are you aware that there is a discrepancy between your account and the truck driver's? He claims your father veered into his lane, that the accident was caused by—" "That's enough," David cut off sharply. "You have her testimony. If you want to challenge it, you can do so through proper channels. This deposition is over." He guided Sara out before she could respond, but the damage was done. Sara's hands were shaking so hard she couldn't push the elevator button. "They're saying my father caused it," she whispered, shock transforming into anger. "They're trying to make it seem like it was his fault so they don't have to pay." David's jaw was tight. That's exactly what they're doing. It's a common tactic. Shift blame to reduce payout. But we have the police report, witness statements, accident reconstruction. The truth is on our side. I won't let them rewrite what happened to save money. That night, Sara had the worst nightmare in weeks. She woke up screaming, convinced she could smell gasoline and blood, that she could hear the sound of metal crunching. Carmen rushed to her room, holding her as she sobbed. "They're trying to say it was his fault," Sara gasped through tears. "They're saying my father, but he didn't. He didn't do anything wrong. We were just a family trying to visit my grandmother." "Why won't they just let it be what it was? A tragic accident where good people died." Carmen rocked her gently, having no answers because there were none that could make sense of how the world treats people who have already lost everything. When Sara finally calmed down enough to breathe normally, she realized something. The anger she felt wasn't weakness. It was strength. She wasn't going to let an insurance company dishonor her parents' memory, wasn't going to let them twist the truth to serve their interests. I'm going to fight this, she told Carmen, her voice still rough but determined. Whatever it takes, I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about what happened. My father was a good driver, a good man. He deserves better than having his name dragged through the mud by people who never even met him. Carmen squeezed her hand. Then we'll help you fight. You're not alone in this. Sara, not anymore. And for the first time since the horrible testimony, Sara felt a little of the tightness in her chest ease. She had people on her side now. David, Michael, Dr. Kim, Carmen, Jade, Melissa. She wasn't the lonely girl on the streets anymore, vulnerable and voiceless. She had become a force, and she would not be silenced or dismissed again. 3 weeks after the traumatic testimony, David called Sara with an urgent voice that immediately put her on edge. You need to come to my office, today if possible. I found something important. Sara took the subway from Queens, her mind racing with possibilities, most of them bad. When she arrived, David's usual calm demeanor seemed energized, almost excited. Sit down, he said, spreading documents across his desk. I've been digging through your parents' financial records, estate documents, everything. And Sara, there's significantly more money than anyone realized. He pointed to a bank statement. Your father had life insurance through his job. We knew that. $500,000. But, he pulled out another document. What nobody mentioned was that your mother also had a separate policy from her job. Another $350,000. And there's more. David's finger traced down a list. A house in Albany sold for $420,000. Your parents' 401k accounts combined had another $270,000. Stocks, bonds, savings accounts. He looked up at her. Sara, we're talking about almost $1.5 million that should have gone to you. Sara felt the room spin. $1.5 million? It was an incomprehensible amount, especially for someone who had survived on less than $5 a day. Where is that money? She managed to ask. David's expression darkened. That's the problem. It was supposedly placed in a trust administered by a court-appointed trustee when you entered foster care, a man named Robert Carlson. But when I contacted him, he was evasive, claimed management fees, living expenses for your care in foster homes, legal fees. By his accounting, there are only about $500,000 left. David leaned forward, intensity in his eyes. Sara, I've handled enough of these cases to smell something wrong. Foster care wasn't costing $200,000 a year. Not even close. Either there's gross mismanagement or, he paused, or there's actual fraud happening. Someone has been dipping into your trust fund, and I intend to find out who and how much. Sara couldn't process it. While she had been homeless, starving, nearly freezing to death, someone had been living off money that rightfully belonged to her. Can we get it back? David's jaw set in a determined line. We're going to try. I'm filing motions for full accounting of every penny. And depending on what we find, there could be criminal charges. This is her inheritance. Money her parents worked hard to provide for her future. Nobody had the right to take it. Michael arrived at the office 20 minutes later. David had called him as well, knowing Sara would need support. When she told him, Michael's normally gentle face showed rare anger. This is unconvincing, he said, pacing. She was a child, vulnerable, no one looking after her interests. And someone exploited that? He turned to Sara. Whatever we need to do to fight this, I'm in. Legal fees, whatever. Sara looked between the two men who had become her unexpected advocates, feeling overwhelming gratitude but also fury building. I want everyone to know, she said quietly but with steel in her voice. Not just get the money back. I want people to understand what happened, how the system failed, how people exploited an orphaned teenager. If this happened to me, it's happening to other kids too. David smiled, genuinely pleased. Now you're thinking like a changemaker. Yes, we're going to expose this. First, we get your money back. Then, he gestured toward documents, we make sure this never happens to another kid. There are advocacy groups, legislative committees, media that would be very interested in this story. Sara felt something shift inside her. For so long, she had been a victim, powerless, acted upon. But now, with the truth coming to light and people who believed her fighting by her side, she wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was becoming someone who could make a difference, who could ensure her suffering meant something beyond just her own pain. Let's do it, she said, meeting David's eyes. Let's fight for every penny, and then let's fight to change the system that allowed this to happen. David extended his hand formally, shaking hers. Then we'll go to war, Ms. Rodriguez, and I guarantee you, we'll win. At that moment, despite the anger and betrayal burning through her, Sara felt something else too: power. For the first time in her life, she had the power to fight back, and she intended to use every bit of it. While David worked on the trust fund investigation, Michael was quietly pursuing his own line of inquiry that he hadn't mentioned to Sara yet. He didn't want to raise hopes only to dash them. As a university professor, he had access to extensive databases and knew researchers who could dig into public records. He had been investigating the truck driver in the accident, looking for anything that might strengthen Sara's case. What he found was shocking. The driver, named Marcus Henderson, had 3 previous violations for negligence, one just 6 months before the fatal accident. 2 companies had fired him for safety concerns, and the trucking company that employed him when he caused the accident, it had a history of hiring drivers with problematic records, cutting corners in maintenance, pushing drivers beyond legal hour limits. Michael compiled everything and took it to David, who literally stood up from his desk in excitement. "This is massive," David breathed, scanning through documents. "This isn't just a tragic accident. This is corporate negligence. A trucking company knowingly putting dangerous drivers on the road. This changes everything." David immediately filed a civil lawsuit. No apenas against insurance company, mas against trucking company itself, Marcus Henderson personally. Wrongful death, negligence, corporate malfeasance, Ella explained para Sara and Michael in meeting. "We're not talking about insurance payout anymore. We're talking about real accountability and potentially significant damages." Ellie spread out projections. "Conservative estimate, 2 to 3 million in settlement. Se vamos para trial e win, could be 5 million or more. Mas Sara," ele looked at her seriously, "isso significa trial, significa jury, media attention, você having to testify again. Isso won't be fácil." Sara thought about dormindo nas ruas while people who should have protected her robbed her blind. Thought about insurance company trying para culpar seu pai. Thought about outras famílias que might suffer, see companies assign, never faced consequences. "I'll do it," Ella said without hesitation. "Whatever takes. Eles need to pay para o que fizeram." Michael squeezed her shoulder. Proud Mas also worried about toll Isa would take. "You don't have to decide agora," Ele began. Mas Sara cut him off. "Yes, I do. Because ISO isn't just about me anymore. It's about making sure companies can't just kill people através de negligência e get away com it. Because victims são too tired or scared to fight." Nos próximos weeks, o case exploded. Quando trucking companies' lawyers realized o que they estavam facing, não apenas simple insurance claim, mas full negligence suit com extensive documentation, they immediately offered settlement. 2 million. Take it or leave it. No admission de wrongdoing. David presented offer para Sara com careful neutrality. It's good money. Life-changing money. E isso ends isso now. No trial stress. Mas, ele added, I think we can get mais, muito more. E more importantly, going to trial means public record to their negligence. Outros victims could use that. It's about more key money Nessie point. Sara didn't hesitate. No settlement, some admission default. You won't let them pay para silence. If we have to go para trial, we go para trial. David grinned. I was hoping você'd say that. Because honestly, I want to destroy them in court. Eles have gotten away com isso for too long. Michael, ever-practical voice, asked, What about Sara's stability? She's finally getting life together. Trial could last months, be emotionally brutal. Sara answered before David could. My stability doesn't mean anything se built on letting injustiça stand. Meus pais taught me to fight para o que é right. It's time I actually honored that. Naquele momento, both men realized que Sara wasn't a vulnerable girl precisando rescue anymore. Ella had transformed into uma force for justice. Someone who would fight not just para herself, mas para principle. O trauma hadn't broken her. Somehow, impossibly, it had forged her into something stronger. The trial began in late June, almost exactly a year after the accident that destroyed Sara's life. Courthouse in Manhattan was imposing, with its marble columns and the weight of justice theoretically being served. Sara walked up those steps flanked by David on one side and Michael on the other. Cameras flashing because the case had gained media attention. Orphaned teen sues trucking giant headlines read. Inside, jury selection had taken a week, and now they sat in their boxes. 12 people who would determine not just money but validation of Sara's suffering and accountability for those responsible. The prosecution table had David and his small team. The defense table was crowded with 4 high-priced lawyers representing the trucking company, all in expensive suits projecting confidence they shouldn't feel given the facts. Judge Martinez, a Latina woman in her 50s with a reputation for fairness, called the court to order. This is a wrongful death suit brought by Sara Rodriguez against Henderson Trucking and Marcus Henderson. Let's proceed. David's opening statement was masterful. He painted a picture not just of tragic accident, but of systematic negligence, of company valuing profits over safety, of young girl left orphaned and then abandoned by every system meant to protect her. Defense's strategy became clear immediately. They'd try to make ISO about money, about opportunistic teenager chasing payday. Ms. Rodriguez's tragedy a real, lead defense attorney conceded him his opening. Mass tragedy doesn't equal liability. Accidents happen. Henderson Trucking followed all regulations. Era insulting deflection. Sara saw several jurors' faces harden. Trial unfolded over 2 weeks. Expert witnesses testified about trucking company's safety violations, about Marcus Henderson's record. Accident reconstruction specialists showed calm, precise detail como truck lost control, como foi definitively driver's fault. Medical examiners testified about Sara's parents' deaths. Clinical, horrible details made Sara sob quietly in gallery. Then veio Sara's turn to testify. Ila walked para witness stand in simple blue dress, hands shaking mas chin up. David guided her through testimony gentilmente. Descreva sua family, o dia do accident, aftermath. Sara's voice cracked repeatedly, mas ela kept going. Então defense attorney stood para cross-examination. He showed his true colors. Ms. Rodriguez, isn't verdade que você ran away from foster care? Yes, but you lived nas ruas voluntarily? It wasn't voluntarily, foi... And now you're seeking millions porque saw opportunity? Sara's anger flashed. I'm seeking justice. Su client killed meus pais through negligencia. Defense attorney smirked. Fatal mistake. Convenient timing, don't you think? Sudden interest in justice when money involved? Something Sara snapped. Ella wasn't scared teenager anymore. Ella was survivor who Tina faced worse que condescending lawyer. You want to know about convenient timing? Her voice rang out, clear and strong. Convenient, Sara, see you hadn't spent 4 months homeless while people robbed my trust fund. Convenient, Sara, so client hadn't been driving a truck after multiple violations. Convenient, Sara, see my parents estavam still alive. Her voice broke as she pushed through. I'm aqui because sua company valued money over safety. It cost my parents suas lives. If standing aqui, telling me a story, expondo o que happened prevents even uma family from going through o que I went through, then every segundo disso worth it. Courtroom was dead silent. Defense attorney, realizing Elid badly miscalculated, had not a more. No further questions, Eli muttered, sitting down. Judge Martinez called recess. Mass damage was done. Both para defense in healing way, para Sara. She'd stood up, spoken her truth, backed down. When testimony concluded, the closing arguments were made. Jury deliberated por apenas 6 hours. Surprisingly quick para-complex case. When they returned, foreman stood. In matter de Rodriguez versus Henderson Trucking, we find para plaintiffing all counts. We award 3 million in compensatory damages e 2 million in punitive damages. 5 million total. But mais importante que amount, foreman continued. And we wish to state para record que this young woman showed extraordinary courage. This company's negligence was unconscionable. Sara's knees buckled. Michael caught her. Ella wasn't crying. Ella was laughing through tears de relief, vindication, justice finally served. In the days following the landmark verdict, David Torres became something of a minor celebrity in the legal world. 5 million in damages against an established trucking company was no small achievement. But for David, the real victory was what was to come next. Pursuing Robert Carlson, the trustee who had mismanaged, or more likely stolen, half of Sara's original trust fund. Now we have resources and momentum, he explained to Sara in his office, now filled with boxes of documents related to her case. And more importantly, we have public attention. Carlson may have thought he could get away with it because you were a powerless kid without an advocate. He was wrong. David had assembled a team, 2 other attorneys from his firm who specialized in fraud cases, a forensic accountant to dissect every transaction, and a private investigator to dig into Carlson's background and spending patterns. It was full-scale legal warfare, and this time, Sara wasn't alone facing the system. She had an army. The forensic accountant, a shrewd woman named Patricia Chen, uncovered what David had suspected. "These management fees are absurd," she showed Sara and David, pointing to a spreadsheet. "He charged 20% annually. Industry standard is 2 to 3%. These living expenses for his foster care, $50,000 a year when state records show homes received less than $15,000. The money didn't go to his care, it went into Carlson's pockets." She pulled out more documents. "And look here, he bought a boat, a timeshare in Florida, a new Mercedes, all within a year of assuming his trust. Timing is not a coincidence." David's expression was grim satisfaction. "This is textbook embezzlement, not just civil fraud, criminal charges territory." He turned to Sara. "I'm filing a criminal complaint with the DA's office in addition to our civil suit. Carlson won't just pay money back. He'll likely face jail time." Sara felt vindication, but also renewed anger. "How many other kids?" she asked quietly. "If he did this to me, he's doing it to others, right?" Patricia nodded slowly. "That's a good question, and one authorities should investigate." David immediately saw where Sara's mind was going. "You want to make this bigger than just your case." Sara met his eyes steadily. "I want to burn down whatever system allowed this to happen. Every trustee he knows, every court that appointed him without oversight, every kid whose money was stolen while they suffered. Yes, I want this bigger." David began filing motions not just against Carlson, but requesting a full audit of all trusts he had managed in the last 10 years. The DA's office, faced with extensive evidence and growing media interest, launched a formal investigation. The media picked up the story. "Teen homeless survivor exposes trust fund fraud." Headlines blazed. Other victims began coming forward. 3 other former foster children who also had Carlson as a trustee, also discovering discrepancies. "This is becoming a class action," David told Sara, almost awed. "You started something. Real reform might actually happen because you refused to just accept the money and move on." A congressional aide reached out, interested in Sara's story for upcoming hearings on foster care reform. Advocacy groups contacted her, offering a platform. The New York Times wanted an interview. It was overwhelming, more attention than Sara ever imagined, but also exactly what she wanted. A spotlight shining on darkness where vulnerable children were exploited. "I'll do every interview, every hearing, every meeting," Sara told Michael when he expressed concern about the toll this might take. "Because if I don't use my voice now, when I finally have the power to be heard, then what was the point of surviving? I didn't go through all this just to get money and disappear. I survived to make a difference." Michael looked at her with a mixture of pride and worry. "Just don't lose yourself in a fight, okay? You also deserve to simply be 17, to heal, to build your life." Sara smiled, tired but determined. "I can do both. Watch me." And somehow, impossibly, she seemed capable of exactly that. The civil case against Robert Carlson went to trial in August, and this time, Sara was prepared. She had testified before, faced down hostile lawyers, and won. This would be easier, because the facts were overwhelmingly on her side. Patricia Chen's forensic accounting had stripped Carlson's defenses bare. He couldn't explain the boat, couldn't justify fees, couldn't produce receipts for alleged living expenses. His lawyer, clearly embarrassed by his client, tried pleading diminished capacity. Carlson had had financial difficulties, made poor decisions. "Poor decisions?" David's voice dripped with sarcasm during the closing argument. "Poor decisions are buying expensive coffee when you're on a budget. This," he gestured to the mountain of evidence, "is calculating theft from an orphaned child during the most vulnerable period of her life. This is depravity." The jury deliberated for 2 hours. They awarded Sara every penny stolen, $750,000, plus interest, punitive damages, and attorney fees. Total, almost $1 million. Combined with the wrongful death settlement, Sara now had approximately $5 million. But numbers were abstract. The real impact hit when David showed her bank statement with a balance. Sara stared at the screen, unable to process. Months ago, she literally had $5 to her name, searching garbage cans for food. Now, "I'm rich," she whispered, almost laughing at the absurdity. "Sara, you are financially secure," Michael corrected gently. "There's a difference. With proper management, that money means you never have to worry about housing, education, basic needs. But," he added carefully, "it also means responsibility. Decisions about how to use it, invest it, maybe give it back. Sara nodded, already thinking, I want to create something, not just for myself, for other kids in the situation I was in. Melissa from the New Beginnings Coalition had been attending trial, and she leaned forward. What if you created a fund, specifically for young people aging out of foster care or experiencing homelessness? Cover things the system doesn't. Deposits for apartments, work clothes, therapy, emergencies. Small amounts that make a huge difference. Sara's eyes lit up. Yes, exactly that. Because I remember when $20 meant a difference between eating or not. What if no kid had to make that choice? David, always practical, interjected. First, nós precisamos to set up proper management para seu funds. Trust. Ironic, I know. Mas legítimo com oversight e fiduciary duty. Financial advisor para investment. Tax attorney porque this quantidade de money tem serious tax implications. Over próximas semanas, team assembled. Wealth manager vetted por David. Tax attorney recomendada por Michael's contacts na Columbia. Critically, Sara insisted on joining board, supervising her trust. She wanted final say, wouldn't be powerless child again. By September, Sara Rodriguez Tina transformed from homeless teenager para young woman com resources. Platform, the increasingly clear vision para her future. She still lived no transitional housing. No faz sense to move até I know onde I'm going para college, Ella explained. Mas everything tinha changed. When she walked down streets on she'd once slept, people occasionally recognized her from news coverage. Some offered congratulations. Others, uncomfortable with reminder to inequality, looked away. Sara didn't care about either reaction. She cared about next steps, foundation, para help outros jovens, finishing GED, aplicando para college. You know o que é strangest part? Ella told Dr. Kim during therapy session. I have everything I thought I wanted. Safety, security, resources. Mas I still wake up algumas noites expecting to estar nas ruas. Parte de mim doesn't believe isso é real. Dr. Kim nodded understandingly. Trauma doesn't erase apenas porque circumstances improve. Healing é ongoing process. But Sara, fato que você está usando seu security para help others, that's incredibly healthy. Você está transforming seu pain into purpose. Sara considered isso. Maybe that's only way pain makes sense. Se você usar isso para ensure outros don't hurt mesma forma. It was philosophy that would guide everything que came next. Com GED secured in October. Ella had passed com scores no top 10% nationally. Vindicando Mr. Patterson's faith in her abilities, Sara começou college application process. Michael naturalmente suggested Columbia. Mas Sara hesitated. That's your world, Ella told him durante de their regular coffee catch-ups. I need para find my own path. No just follow on você leads. Michael understood, even felt pride in her independence. Then where você está thinking? Sara pulled out lista que she'd compiled come help the college counselor Melissa connected her with. Schools come strong social work programs. Places onde I can learn how to actually help people, no just throw money in problems. Maybe Georgetown, maybe NYU, possibly UC Berkeley. She paused. I want para understand systems que failed me, until I can fix them. That requires real education, not just good intentions. Applications forum grueling, essays requiring her to articulate trauma repeatedly, recommendations needing coordination, financial aid forms ironicamente complex, given her unusual situation. I technically have millions mas também was homeless 6 months ago. Sara laughed darkly. Financial aid offices não know o que fazer com that. Michael helped edit essays, careful to suggest no dictate. Carmony Jade proofread, offering perspective to people who understood her background. David wrote recommendation focusing on her courage standing up in court. Dr. Kim wrote outro, destacando her resilience e growth. By December, applications forum submitted. Then VEO waiting. Agonizing months on Sara threw herself into planning her foundation while anxiously checking email. Acceptances started rolling in February. NYU, yes. Georgetown, yes, come generous financial aid despite her wealth porque they admired her story. Berkeley, waitlisted. Então, unexpectedly, Columbia sent thick envelope despite her no having applied. Inside ear a letter from Dean de School of Social Work. Though você didn't formally apply, Professor Chen brought the story para our attention. We'd like para offer you full scholarship to our undergraduate program come guaranteed admission para our master's EM social work. We believe você represent exactly type de student who can transform nossa field. Sara stared at letter in disbelief, então looked at Michael quem had obviously had hand disso. You, she started. No sure se estava touched or annoyed. Michael held up hands defensively. I mentioned you to me friend who's on admissions committee. That's all. They made decision independently. Sara reread letter. Coração pounding. Columbia. Ivy League. Michael's institution. Uma dos best social work programs no país. But também, this feels like charity, Ella said quietly. Like I'm getting him because to pity. Not merit. Michael's response was firm. Sara, seu GED scores são excellent. Seu story demonstrates exactly kind of real-world experience e passion that schools want. E frankly, qualquer institution teria luck to have you. This não é charity. É them recognizing value você bring. Carmen, reading over her shoulder, squealed. Oh my God, você tem to say yes. Columbia. Do you know quantas pessoas would kill para this opportunity? But Jade, sempre more perceptive, saw Sara's hesitation. You're scared no é real, Ella said softly. Scared they'll take it away. Oh, você'll fail. Oh, I don't deserve it, Sara finished. Everything happened so fast. Year ago, I was starving nas ruas. Como I'm supposed para just be Ivy League student? Fit 'em come people who never missed meal, never slept in abandoned building. Dr. Kim, quando Sara trouxe isso up in therapy, cut straight para heart disso. This imposter syndrome, exacerbated por trauma. Você feel like fraud porque suffering taught you que good things don't last, que you're not worthy. But Sara, você earned this. Through surviving, through fighting, through refusing para give up. Your path wasn't traditional. Must that doesn't make achievement less valid. She leaned forward. Question A. What do you want? Not okay you think você deserves? Not okay others expect. What does Sara want para her life? Sara thought sober that, durante toda session, durante sleepless night after. Finally, Ela called Michael. I'm saying yes, Ela told him. To Columbia. Not porque você pulled strings, mas porque você right. I do have valuable perspective. I want best education possible until I can actually make difference. But, she added firmly,
I'm not being so protege au charity case. I'm being student who earned her place. Deal? Michael's voice was warm with pride. Deal. And Sara? Você going para be extraordinary. I already know isso. When acceptance letter officially arrived, she'd had para formally accept offer. Sara held it.
Really let herself feel weight to what this meant. College, Ivy League education, path para career helping others. Future que she'd thought was destroyed forever, no wet highway in Connecticut. Mom, Dad, she whispered para photos in her mochila. I hope you're proud. I'm finally becoming person você raised me para be. E pela primeira vez quando spoke para their photos, Ella wasn't apologizing para surviving or struggling. Ella was sharing victory, sharing hope, sharing future que they would have wanted para her. It felt, finally, like moving forward instead to just away from pain. Classes at Columbia were to begin in August. But in June, Sara was invited to speak at a conference on youth homelessness in Manhattan. It was her first major speaking engagement, and she was nervous. Telling a story to a camera or in court was one thing, but addressing an auditorium full of social workers, policymakers, and advocates, that felt different. Michael offered to accompany her for support, but Sara declined. I need to do this myself, she explained. Establish that I can stand on my own. Morning of the event, she dressed carefully, professional but not trying too hard, wanting to look capable without erasing where she'd been. Her speech was written, rewritten, practiced. She arrived early, standing backstage while the introducer listed her accomplishments. Homelessness survivor, advocate for foster care reform, incoming Columbia student. It sounded like someone else's life. Then Ella stepped onto stage. He froze, because sitting in third row, taking notes intently, era Jennifer Martinez, assistente social who'd watched her en biblioteca todos those months ago. Their eyes met. A recognition flashed simultaneamente. Jennifer's mouth opened in surprise, into something like joy. Sara nearly forgot her prepared remarks. Mass training kicked him. She delivered speech, raw. Honest account D falling through cracks, surviving streets, finding her way back through combination de luck, stubbornness, people who cared. She talked about systems that fail, about how one person paying attention can change everything. When finished, Applause was thunderous. Mas Sara's eyes kept returning para Jennifer, que estava wiping tears. During Q&A, Jennifer raised her hand. Sara, Ms. Rodriguez, I was de social workers que saw you in biblioteca last winter. I watched você repeatedly, wanted para help, mas was afraid de approaching e scaring you away. I've thought about você so many times, wondered se você were okay. May I ask, o que would have made diferença? How could I have reached você? Sara paused, really considering question. Honestly, I don't know se anything você said would have worked então. I was too traumatized, too distrustful. But Ela thought about Michael Nos de Graus, about how one act of basic kindness, helping him no fall, receiving sandwich, had planted seed. Maybe just consistent presence? No pushing, just being there, being safe person. Eventually, quando I was ready, I might have approached você. Jennifer nodded, scribbling notes. And parasocial workers trying para help jovens in similar situations now. Sara's response was firm. Listen para them. Actually listen. Não just process them through system. Believe them quando they tell você about abuse. Fight para them mesmo quando é inconvenient ou complicated. E understand que trust isn't given freely quando every adult has failed you. It has para be earned, slowly, through consistent action, no just words. After event, Jennifer approached. I'm sorry I didn't do more, she começou. Mas Sara stopped her. You saw me. Moment quando I felt invisible. Você saw me as person worth watching, worth caring about. That mattered, mesmo se você didn't approach. Maybe, Sara added pensatively. Você watching taught me que I was still worth seeing, mesmo quando I couldn't see isso myself. Jennifer pulled business card. Mas also wrote personal cell no back. If você ever need anything, recommendation, professional connection, or just someone who understands system você trying para change, please call me. She paused. What você doing? Building foundation, going para Colombia, speaking out. Iso's going para save lives, Sara. Kids who are situation você were they're going para survive porque de what você building. Sara pocketed card, feeling circle completing somehow. Jennifer, posso I ask something? Anything. Why did you watch me? Daquelas dias em biblioteca. O que made você pay attention quando so many others didn't? Jennifer's answer was simple but profound. Because I recognize something in você. Not just trauma, though that era obvious, but fight. This determination para stay human, para keep learning, para not give up mesmo quando giving up would have been easier. I've been doing this work 15 years, Sara. I know resilience quando I see it. E você had it in spades, mesmo quando you were at your lowest. She smiled softly. I just wish I'd been brave enough então para tell você that. That conversation stayed com Sara long after conference ended. She thought about all pessoas who might have seen her durante those months. Quantos others had noticed mas no acted. Quantos had wanted para help mas didn't know how. It reinforced her determination. Ela would create no just resources mas também training, education para people who wanted para help mas felt paralyzed por not knowing right approach. Because Jennifer caring, mesmo silently, had mattered. Imagine quanto more impact if she'd had tools of confidence para actually intervene. That was work Sara could do. Bridge gap entre people who cared to people who needed caring. Between systems that should work a broken reality that needed fixing. Jennifer had been silent witness para her suffering. Sara would ensure future witnesses had voices, had power, had systems that supported intervention instead to creating barriers. It was ambitious, maybe impossibly so. But until again, surviving what she'd survived had seemed impossible too. Sara had learned que sometimes impossible era just starting point para extraordinary. 4 years passed in a blur of intense classes, social services internships, nights studying until dawn, and constant work on her foundation, which had grown from idea to full operational nonprofit. Sara hadn't merged into Colombia seamlessly. There were moments of feeling like an outsider, of struggling with material that classmates with privileged backgrounds absorbed easily, of panic attacks when stress triggered memories of the streets. But she'd persisted, driven by a purpose that went beyond grades. Her senior thesis had been on reforming trustee oversight in foster care systems, directly inspired by her own experience. Professors had called it groundbreaking and policy-ready. Now, in May, With the sun shining on Columbia's campus, Sara stood in line with hundreds of other graduates, cap and gown making her indistinguishable from peers who had never known hunger or homelessness. But she knew the difference, carried it with a straighter posture, with a more profound appreciation for opportunity than others took for granted. Scanning crowd quando approached her row, Sara spotted them. Michael, agora come more Graham hair mas same gentle smile, sitting beside Jennifer Martinez, ambos wiping eyes ja. Carmen tinha flown from California, onde she'd built life after leaving transitional housing. Jade estava there, now working como peer counselor for homeless youth. Dr. Kim tinha sent flowers com note. Proud doesn't begin para cover it. E mesmo David Torres, perpetually busy, had made time, sitting como his wife, e beaming like proud pie. When Sara's name was called, Sara Rodriguez, Bachelor of Arts in Social Work, summa cum laude. Roar from her section was disproportionately loud. Michael stood, clapping ate his hands were red. Jennifer was openly crying. Sara crossed stage, shook Dean's hand, accepted diploma que represented no just 4 years to study, mas complete transformation to life. And that moment, holding paper proof de achievement, she allowed herself para feel full weight to journey. From broken girl sleeping in abandoned building para college graduate com honors, surrounded per people qui loved her, he believed her. Reception after was intimate gathering Sara had planned. Not huge party, but dinner com her chosen family. Michael raised glass para toast. 4 anos ago, I met uma young woman no degraus de biblioteca que needed help. But truth she didn't need saving. Ela needed opportunity para save herself. Sara, watching você não just survive, mas thrive, não just heal, mas dedicate to a life para healing others, has been greatest privilege to my life. To Sara, may you change world como you've already changed so many lives. Jennifer went next, voice shaky com emotion. I watched você in that library e saw resilience. Hoje, I see fulfillment de every promise that resilience held. Sara, você not just survivor, você architect de better future para countless kids. Thank você for showing us o que is possible quando we refuse para give up on young people. Carmen, nunca won para speeches, simply hugged Sara tight. He whispered, "You made it, hermana." We both did. You look on we are now. It was Jade, quiet Jade. He said something que made Sara's composure finally crack. You know, okay, I remember most about quando você moved into transitional housing. You were so broken, tão scared. But você also kept those photos de seus pais, kept talking para them. Tonight, they'd be so fucking proud to who you became. We all are. Sara's speech, quando her turn came, was no long. I stand here because people cared quando they didn't have to. Michael, she looked at him directly. Você saw person quando world saw problem. Jennifer, você witnessed quando you could have ignored. Carmen, Jade, você gave me community quando I'd forgotten how to trust. Dr. Kim, David, Melissa, everyone who invested in me quando I had nothing para offer back except my word que I'd keep fighting. She paused, composing herself. This diploma is mine, mas it's também theirs. E it's dedicated para every kid still sleeping nas ruas tonight, para every teenager aging out to foster care sem support, para every young person que system failed. I was one de lucky ones. I had Michael nos degraus quando I needed him most. My life's works are ensuring luck isn't required. Que every kid tem people who care, systems que work, resources que sustain. She raised her own glass. This is not ending. It's beginning. Real work starts now. I won't rest ate every kid tem chance I fought para ter. Applause was subdued, heavy come emotion e weight to promise. Michael caught Sara de poise, pulling her aside. You know você don't have para carry weight to world, right? It's okay para também just live your life, be happy, have normal experiences. Sara smiled, softer version de fierce determination que had kept her alive nas ruas. Michael, this is my happiness. Fighting para others, creating change. Iso's no burden. It's purpose. It's how I make sense to everything que happened. Besides, she added, come slight grin, I'm also planning para go para graduate school. Maybe date eventually, quando I have time, definitely travel. I can have purpose of life. Watch me do both. And knowing Sara como he did a pause 4 years, Michael didn't doubt Ella would accomplish exactly that. Porque Sara Rodriguez didn't know how para do anything halfway. She'd survived impossible, achieved improbable. And now she was ready para attempt extraordinary, changing system that had failed her. until it couldn't fail anyone else. 2 weeks upon graduation, Sara officially launched Second Chance Foundation, name chosen deliberately para reflect her own journey and mission, para give other jovens opportunity ela nearly didn't have. She'd been building infrastructure durante college years, assembling board de directors incluindo Jennifer, incorporating como nonprofit, establishing partnerships come existing organizations like Melissa's New Beginnings Coalition. But real launch, when Foundation actually começou distributing resources, the accepting applications de jovens em need, that was May 29th, exactly 5 years para day após acidente que killed seus pais. Timing era intentional. Sara wanted para transform anniversary to tragedy into celebration to hope. Launch event was held in Community Center in Lower East Side, not far from onde she'd once slept in abandoned building. Media turnout was substantial. Sara's story captured public imagination. Her foundation represented feel-good narrative that news outlets craved. But Sara's speech at launch wasn't feel-good platitudes. Let me be clear sobre o que we're doing here. She addressed crowd to donors, social workers, journalists, and critically, several homeless youth qui had been invited. This foundation no é about charity. It's about justice, about correcting systemic failures qui allow children para fall through cracks. Every dollar we distribute é acknowledgement que society failed these jovens first. She gestured para literature describing programs. Emergency grants até $5,000 para housing deposits, job training, medical needs. Ongoing support até $2,500 mensalmente para jovens enrolled in education programs. Therapy coverage, same questions asked. Legal advocacy fund para cases envolvendo exploitation. These amounts podem parecer small para alguns, mas their difference entre getting apartment e sleeping in car, between eating and starving, between hope and despair. I know porque I lived it. Sara shared numbers que board tinha compiled. Estimated 20,000 homeless youth in New York City alone, average age 16, 70% having experienced trauma or abuse. These no são statistics. They're people. They're me 5 years ago, sleeping nas ruas and wondering si anyone cared si I lived or died. Foundation's approach was deliberately different from traditional charities. Applications were simple, no Byzantine forms designed para discourage. Applicants met peer counselors, other former homeless youth, who understood experiences intimately. Funds were distributed quickly, not apause months to bureaucratic processing. Critically, there was follow-up support, mentorship programs, job connections, educational advocacy. We're not just throwing money at problem, Sara explained para major donor durante reception. We're building ecosystem de support que addresses root causes de youth homelessness, while também providing immediate relief. First year's budget was modest by nonprofit standards. $500,000, carefully managed portion de Sara's settlement money combined come initial donor contributions. Goal was ajudar approximately some youth directly, potentially maze through advocacy work. Board had tried para convince Sara para think bigger, start larger, but she'd insisted, I want para prove concept works antes scaling up. I want para get it right, not just get it big. By end of first month, Foundation had received 200 applications. Overwhelming response que simultaneously validated needy stressed resources. Sara found herself working 60-hour weeks, reviewing applications, meeting applicants, coordinating service providers, managing staff que she'd hired. Michael worried about burnout, but Sara was energized in way que academics nunca quite achieved. This is why I survived, she told him quando he expressed concern. Not para get degree or make money, but para do this. Para be person I needed quando I estava nas ruas. Among first recipients was 17-year-old named Marcus, who reminded Sara painfully to herself, recently aged out to foster care, sleeping in subway, trying per hold-down job while homeless. Foundation's intervention was immediate. Paid deposit per room in SRO hotel, gave him stipend para food supplies and quanto he saved para better housing, connected him come therapist to job training program. 3 months later, Marcus had apartment, stable job in warehouse. Tinha enrolled in community college classes. You saved my life, he told Sara quando they met para check-in. Sara's response was firm. No, I gave you opportunity para save yourself. You did hard work. Don't forget that. It was critical distinction para her. She never wanted recipients para feel like charity cases, but rather empowered individuals who deserved support. 2 anos into Foundation's operation, results were undeniable. Foundation had directly assisted 150 jovens come emergency funding. 67 had completed job training programs. 42 were enrolled in college or vocational school. 15 had transitioned into stable housing. But numbers didn't capture real stories. Emma, 19, who'd been homeless upon escaping abusive home, now working como medical assistant at saving para nursing school. Devin, 17, who'd been kicked out for being gay, now living safely advocating para LGBTQ homeless youth. Maria, 16, who'd escaped sex trafficking, now therapy planning para become social worker herself. Each tinha story de resilience. Kata represented what was possible when the support arrived at critical moment. Sara knew every name, every story, porque she made point to meeting recipients personally whenever possible. It was exhausting, emotionally draining. Kata's story triggered her own memories, mas também profoundly healing. She was transforming her trauma into tangible change. Media attention had continued, transforming Sara into somewhat reluctant public figure. She'd been featured in New York Times Magazine, invited para speak at TED Conference, interviewed in national television. El título que kept appearing, from homeless para Ivy League para helping others. Sara had mixed feelings about fame, useful para raising awareness and funds, mas também reductive, turning complex journey into soundbite. They want inspiring story, she complained para Dr. Kim durante therapy session que she still attended regularly. They don't want para hear about nights I still wake up panicking, about how I check locks obsessively, about how I can't throw away food mesmo cuando it's spoiling because I remember when I would have eaten anything. Dr. Kim nodded understandingly. You're allowed para be both, inspiring figure, a person still healing. Those aren't contradictory. Sara was learning that, slowly, como she navigated increasingly public life while também doing private work to therapy, processing trauma, rebuilding sense to self that wasn't defined solely per suffering. Foundation's work had also attracted attention to policymakers. Sara testified perante New York City Council about gaps in youth services, presented recommendations baseadas in direct experience. Some politicos dismissed her como naive, idealista, not understanding political realities. Others were compelled per her first-hand knowledge, her refusal para accept excuses para why system couldn't work better. One council member, upon hearing her testimony sobre trustee oversight reform, actually pulled legislation cause she'd helped draft David's legal expertise. This is frustrating, Sara told Jennifer upon particularly contentious hearing. They nod, they say encouraging things, mas actual change moves tone slowly. Jennifer, veteran to decades navigating bureaucracy, offered perspective. You've accomplished 2 years o que most advocates spend careers trying para do. Be patient. Seeds você planting hoje won't flower amanhã, but they will grow. It was lessening long-term thinking que Sara, who'd had para survive day-to-day for so long, found challenging but necessary para learn. Mas perhaps most meaningful impact was informal. Former recipients returning para volunteer, creating cycle to paying forward. Marcus, who'd been one to first helped, now volunteered 15 hours weekly, meeting come new applicants, sharing his experience. Sara gave me roadmap, he explained. Now I'm offering same para others. Emma organized support group para female survivors de abuse. Devin started LGBTQ-specific resource guide. Foundation was becoming not just service provider but community. Network to people who'd survived impossible were committed para ensuring others didn't have para face it alone. Sara, observing community building organically, realized this era what she'd wanted all along. No para be savior, but para create space on people could save themselves, support each other, build collective power to those who society had discarded. This is bigger than me now, she told board meeting cuando discussing succession planning. Even after apenas 2 years, Sara was thinking about sustainability, about ensuring Foundation would continue regardless to her personal involvement. That's exactly how it should be. I started ISO, mas it belongs para everyone it serves, para everyone who believes second chances aren't luxuries but rights. Her vision was expanding, growing beyond immediate service provision para systemic advocacy, policy reform, cultural shift in how society viewed and treated its most vulnerable young people. Slowly, impossibly, against all odds he had once been stacked against her, Sara Rodriguez estava actually making isso happen. By idade 22, Sara tinha become something she never intended. Símbolo. Articles referred para her como the face de homeless youth advocacy. TEDx talk tinha millions de views. Universities invited her para commencement speeches onde she shared story de transformation from sleeping in abandoned buildings para graduating Columbia. Publishing houses wanted memoir. She'd declined various times, feeling into too close para trauma para commercialize it. Mas was considering eventually porque proceeds could fund foundation. Most surprisingly, Hollywood producer approached about film rights para her story. Absolutely not, Tina been her immediate response. I'm not entertainment. Suffering to homeless youth no feel-good movie fodder. But producer was persistent, offering creative control, commitment para donating substantial portion to profits para foundation, a platform para reaching millions who might never read article or attend conference. Sara was considering, reluctantly, porque exposure could translate into policy change, si done right. Mas being symbol tinha downsides que Sara hadn't anticipated. She couldn't go para social work conferences, sem being mobbed. Couldn't post on social media some hundreds of messages, some thanking her, others attacking. Invariably people claiming she was exploiting tragedy, or hadn't really suffered, or was promoting victim mentality. Death threats came occasionally from people who objected para her advocacy, who felt she was criticizing institutions they valued, who simply hated seeing young woman de color wielding influence. Michael, still close advisor, though Sara had long since moved into her own apartment, worried constantly. You need security, he'd urged, a pause particularly threatening message. Sara resisted. I refuse para live in fear after surviving actual danger, but eventually compromised online security measures, being more careful about publicizing her location. Most painful were messages from people desperate para help because she couldn't possibly assist. My daughter is homeless, can você? I'm about para age out to foster care, can your foundation? We're about para lose housing. Can você? Sara wanted para help everyone, mas resources eram limited, demand overwhelming. Each no felt like personal failure. Jennifer, observing Sara's struggle come sudden prominence, offered wisdom. You can't save everyone, Sara. Trying para will destroy você. Your value isn't apenas individual people você help directly. It's systems você are changing que will help thousands você'll never meet. It was intellectually correct, mas emotionally difficult. Sara found herself working constantly, struggling para set boundaries, using work para avoid processing residual trauma, porque helping others felt easier than helping herself. Dr. Kim called her on it during session. You're using foundation como avoidance, Sara. Every hour você work at the exhaustion hour você don't have proceed come your own pain ainda não fully healed. Confrontation era uncomfortable but necessary. Sara started enforcing work-life boundaries. No emails pause 8 p.m. Sundays completely off. Making time para friendships que weren't related para advocacy work. She começou dating. Awkwardly at first. Still hypervigilant and distrustful, but slowly learning para open up. First serious relationship ended pause 6 months quando boyfriend admitted he was intimidated for her public profile a commitment para work. Sara was devastated but also relieved. Melhor descobrir incompatibility early que waste tempo com someone who couldn't handle who she'd become. Media continued requesting interviews, particularly on anniversaries. 5 years since accidente, 5 years since surviving streets, 5 years since wrongful death settlement. Sara developed standard response. She'd do interview apenas si outlet committed para covering broader issues to youth homelessness, not just her individual story. I'm not special, Hila insisted repeatedly. I'm lucky. Lucky Michael was no de gross that day. Lucky David took my case. Lucky I survived quando thousands don't. Tell stories to kids still nasru us. The system still failing. Tell how para fix problems. Known just how inspirational it young girl survived. Some outlets agreed, others disappeared quando she insisted terms. Gradually, Sara was learning para control narrative. Para use platform strategically rather que being used por it. She was transforming from reactive symbol into proactive agent de change, deciding quando y how para engage publicly, what battles para fight, which opportunities aligned come her mission versus which were merely exploitative. It was education and power que no college course could provide. Practical, sometimes brutal, always necessary para someone committed para playing long game to social change. Sara, who'd once been powerless in every way, was learning para wield influence she'd accumulated not for personal glory, but for collective liberation to young people still suffering como she once had. That sense to purpose, clarity to mission, was what sustained her a través de difficult moments, through public scrutiny, through residual trauma aimed at healing. She'd survived para reason. She was determined para make that survival count for something bigger than herself. 7 years após acidente que destroyed her family, Sara stood no rooftop the new building que Second Chance Foundation tinha purchased in Bronx. Era wasn't just office space. Era comprehensive youth center come emergency shelter beds, counseling rooms, computer lab para job applications e education, commercial kitchen teaching culinary skills, e small apartments para transitional housing. Opening tinha taken 3 years to fundraising, planning, navigating regulations, mas finally era real. Physical space dedicada para giving homeless youth everything Sara wished she'd had durante darkest moments. Grand opening was quiet affair. Sara detestava fanfare, preferring substance over spectacle. But key people were present. Michael, agora semi-retired from Colombia, mas still actively involved in Foundation's education programs. Jennifer, who'd left her city job para work como Foundation's director de advocacy. Carmen, visiting from LA on she ran her own nonprofit. David Torres, still handling legal matters pro bono. Dr. Kim, who'd helped Sara build mental health program incorporated into Foundation services. Tour de facility revealed thoughtful details born to lived experience. Showers had locks que actually worked, privacy ensured. Sara remembered vulnerability to trying para bathe in public bathrooms. Shelter beds tinham individual storage lockers porque she knew importance to protecting few possessions você owned. Kitchen was stocked não com cheap processed food, mas nutritious options porque she remembered how malnutrition felt. Counseling rooms eram warm, comfortable, no institutional, designed para feel safe rather que clinical. Computers eram high quality, porque Sara remembered frustration de trying para job search in bibliotecas slow outdated machines. Every detail carried weight de personal knowledge, the understanding o que made difference entre surviving e actually having chance para thrive. This ain't credible, Michael said quietly, voice thick, calm emotion. Sara, você built something extraordinary. Sara smiled but corrected. We built isso. Everyone aqui, everyone who believed quando I tinha nothing. Everyone who contributed. This a collective achievement. I just had vision porque I lived o que we're trying para prevent. Mais de opening physical space, Sara tinha achieved something broader. Second Chance Foundation era now nationally recognized, operating in 5 cities, com $2 million annual budget raised through combination de Sara's initial contribution, private donors, e increasingly, government grants recognizing effectiveness. Foundation had helped over 500 youth directly, influenced policy in 3 states, trained hundreds of social workers in trauma-informed approach para working come homeless adolescents. Research partnership come Colombia's School de Social Work era studying outcomes, preparing data para broader advocacy. Sara herself tinha completed master's degree in social work, fitting education into impossibly busy schedule porque credibility mattered, porque she wanted expertise para back experience. She was being mentioned para awards, recognition que made her uncomfortable but que board insisted she accept porque visibility helped fundraising. Mas most meaningful moment at opening wasn't speeches you tours. Era young woman, 17, timidly approaching Sara. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm Alex. I was sleeping in subway 2 months ago. Your foundation helped me get room SRO, gave me stipend for food. I start community college next week. Tears streaming, Alex continued. I didn't think anyone cared see I lived or died. Você showed me I was wrong. And when I get my degree, when I get stable, I want para help other kids too. Pay it forward, like você do. Sara hugged Alex, her own tears flowing porque this was why everything else mattered. Not awards or recognition, not media attention or policy victories, mas individual human beings standing in front to her, whose life trajectory tinha changed porque support existed quando she needed it. You're going para do amazing things, Sara told Alex. And você right. Pay it forward. That's how nós create real change. Each person helped becomes person who helps others. We build network to care system fails para provide. Alex nodded, smiled through tears. Sara saw in her eyes reflection to herself 7 years ago. Broken, but fighting. Terrified, but hoping. Lost, but finding way. Como evening concluded, the guests departed. Sara fiku alone in rooftop for moment. Looking out over city ki had nearly killed her, but Tambem, impossibly, transformed her. Skyline glittered indifferent. Mesma vista ki existed quando she was freezing streets, quando future seemed impossible. But everything had changed. No just city mas Sara herself, her circumstances, possibilities Katingam opened. She thought about parents, como always, wondering okay they'd think. I hope I made você proud. She whispered into cold air. I hope surviving means something. I hope, voice broke. I hope other kids won't have para suffer como I did, para get help they need. That's my promise, para vocês, para everyone who doesn't make it. Para kids ainda nas ruas tonight. I survived. I'll spend rest of my life ensuring that survival leads para something bigger. Para world onde no teenager has para choose between safety or freedom. Onde system works instead de fails. Onde second chances aren't luck but guarantees. Wind carried words away, but commitment remained. Solid como building beneath her feet. Sara Rodriguez tina gone from sleeping in abandoned warehouses para creating sanctuary para others. From being failed for every system para rebuilding those systems. From victim para survivor para advocate para architect the change. She wasn't done, no even close. Isso era just beginning to work que would define her life, her legacy, her transformation. To personal tragedy into collective hope. She descended from rooftop, ready para whatever came next, carrying forward light que had been lit naqueles 60 seconds nos library steps. Quando stranger decided para care. Quando girl decided para trust once more. Quando possibility the second chance sparked into existence. It changed absolutely everything.